My fellow old rollers, welcome to the show. International Man of Mystery, second degree black belt under Ricardo Laborio, Malachy Friedman, head instructor and owner of ATT Low Country in Charleston, South Carolina. Malachy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
It's really excited to have you. A little bit of history for some of my listeners. The only podcast that I've done other than my own has been yours, the Jiu-Jitsu Rules Everything Around Me, or Dream podcast. So there's an episode where we spent a couple hours chit-chatting before, where I was doing some of the talking, which I don't do a lot on this show. That was a lot of fun, and that actually gave me the idea that maybe podcasting was a thing that I could do, because I really enjoyed that show with you.
Yeah, that was awesome. We went for a deep dive on that one.
Dude, it was so much fun, especially your perspective, and it helped me to kind of come to that perspective too, that jiu-jitsu can be found anywhere if you're just willing to look. And so it was very exciting for me.
Yeah. Did you ever watch the Last Dance?
I don't think I've seen that one, no.
So it's with the Bulls, Jordan and the Bulls from, like, I guess maybe 89, the season of 89, when they finally beat the Pacers, or not the Pacers, the Pistons.
The Pistons,
and,
yeah.
And then they had all the way to, I would just say you could skip everything until episode 7 through 10. And then you're getting like real mindset focused, perfection focused type stuff, which was, I just finished it tonight. It was good.
Yeah, so it's definitely on my list. And I just found out from work that my next 3 months I'm on a leave of absence, kind of a voluntary furlough. So I'm being paid half pay not to work, and so I'm gonna be able to catch up with a couple of shows that I want to watch, and that The Last Dance is on that list.
That's all I do. I do TV and jiu-jitsu. That's basically it.
That's a good pick. I'm fine with that.
I don't understand why people want to go outside so much. You know, they want to go to the beach and they want to hang out in the sand. And they want to come home salty and burnt up.
You guys got all those sand fleas down in South Carolina too, so.
Well, I think more south. I mean, well, yeah, we have a beach called Mosquito Beach, but nothing like I've ever felt when I was in northern Florida. It was the worst mosquitoes I've ever felt on the beach. So who wants to go outside with that stuff?
Screw that. Looks like when we were talking last, we talked a lot about Jordan and Rodman, specifically Rodman, and the jiu-jitsu of positioning in his rebound game, because he was always going rebounds against centers, and he was 6'7", so he, in terms of height, he couldn't compete. Right. And one of the things that I really liked about that talk is it really helped me to put into perspective what I wanted my jiu-jitsu to be. And I realized from that talk that a lot of it is about timing, and not necessarily being ahead, but being correct. And if you're correct, you're ahead. And so I wanted to thank you for that. That talk helped me have a lot of perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was also breaking down the triangle defense with Jordan, and he did something really cool where he said Jordan always does this. There's something I never noticed, was that he puts his elbow to the outside of small of the opponent's back, right? As soon as he gets his elbow to the small of the opponent's back, he knows he's going to make the shot to the rim. He's already around his opponent. He already has. So it's just the same thing as jiu-jitsu. If I have my knee inside there, likely I'm going to take the back. It's like if I get my elbow outside of the back take, they're not going to take my back. The elbows are almost everything. When you think about, like, your rotational and then your hip rotation. It's basketball. It's all the sports combined. I mean, it's all biomechanics. With athleticism, with a little bit of craftsmanship and a little bit of knowledge, but just seeing that Rodman picked up, like when he was doing the details stuff, he really picked up on mechanical details more so than just like he's getting the ball, this leaves this man open. He's a lot of his stuff is blocking out where these people are, that step that person made, why they couldn't correct that step. It was really good. I mean, I really like Rodman. You can't tell. So I made a mistake, and I bet on 3 things on an auction, thinking I was going to win one, but I won all 3. My wife almost killed me. My wife was like, "What?" It's like they kept coming one after another, and like so she gets the mail first, and all of a sudden it's the jersey, and she's like, "Did you go order a jersey?" I'm like, "Yeah, I won it on an auction. It was pretty cheap." She's like, "Okay," and then all of a sudden this, where is it? Over here is somebody's fan art that I thought was like, okay, like if I don't get the jersey, at least I'll get something of it. I got that. So many stupid. Oh Lord help me. My wife was so upset. She like opened up every box I opened up was like a shame box.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I had a similar situation. I didn't know which mic to get, for podcasting.
Uh-huh.
So they were fairly cheap, so I just ordered all of them. And so it was like one after another, like all these mics came in the same day. And my wife was like, what, how many mics do you need? I'm like, I don't know. I just got them all. They were cheap. She goes, well, how cheap? So then I showed her, and she's like, that's not that cheap.
No, it's not. Man, I do the same thing with pop figures. I had to promise this the last one. Like, listen, this is the last one I'm buying. But then Larry Bird came out. I'm like, listen, I just got to get Larry Bird. Then I made a promise that if I got Larry Bird, I would only buy another basketball pop if it was Reggie Miller or Dennis Rodman. I was like, if those come out, listen, I'm allowed to get those 2. Any other ones, we can argue about it and be like, do you really like Sean Kemp? No, I remember Sean Kemp, and I want to have it now. Like it's the South Park member berries. That's what I'm
Yeah.
living in,
So to give you a little rundown on this podcast, the Old Rollers podcast is dedicated to the idea of getting as good as possible and staying as good as possible for as long as possible. And so there is a skill component and a longevity component to our aim and our goal here. And as both a practitioner and a coach, I know that you are very experienced. You've gone through, competing in MMA and having some injuries, coaching at a high level. You've seen a lot of things. And so I wanted to spend some time picking your brain, in terms of what your ideas of those, of how we can do those things. And just for my listeners to give, a little bit of background, I first heard of Malachy from a Heisengard Budo videos. It was like a 15-minute segment with you and Budo Jake, and then I thought it was so cool that I bought that video. And so, I've used the Heisengard now for a little over a year, and I also got the Flower Power, and I'm gonna get the Darce Killer. It just, it happened that my interest in that one came up sort of after the slowdown, and so
Right.
my job is a little bit in flux. So I'm trying to, be cautious. I'm only buying things that are like necessary at this time, with the exclusion of those mics. But I think you're obviously a very technical instructor, but you've also, performed at a very high level and taught people, to compete at a very high level. And so wanted to get your thoughts on what you're doing, what you've done as a practitioner, but also as a coach in terms of that skill development longevity, framework.
Yeah. I mean, I think once I found jiu-jitsu, I hit it, or not even jiu-jitsu. When I found MMA and I found out that I was a jiu-jitsu player in MMA, I don't think I ever took a day off. I think I did probably 2-a-days. I never turned down sparring. I never turned down training. I never turned down any of that stuff. And one day I just like hit a wall and my arm dropped dead. I was like, maybe this will, and then I'm like, oh, it got better. Went to bed, woke up, nothing. Couldn't fix it for nothing. Waited a year, got the steroid injections, couldn't deal with all like the head snap down stuff. So I went to the gi, and injuring myself again, getting a second surgery. And then once I started picking up momentum, getting knee surgery, I could tell you that I was probably, and there's guys that can do that, that can train all day, every day, and just have like nagging, like Achilles injuries, or like, maybe where they tore their rotator cuff. And those are all bad injuries, but like the spine sucks. Like once you start messing with nerves, you start messing with stuff that's like being compressed, and it just, like, the funny thing was that I opened my school about 5 years ago on the 15th, I think, the 15th of June. And I had like 3.5 months, I tore my groin, then I threw my back out. The doctor's like, hey, you cannot do anything. Don't bend down, don't do anything. And I'm like, man, I've been open for 3.5 months. What am I supposed to do, not teach?
Right.
I didn't even have that clout yet where I can go like, oh, well, trust me, when I am better, you're going to be really, really happy. And so the longevity for myself is just currently changing with the sport. Like when I first opened my gym, I didn't want to make any DVDs for anybody because I wanted to keep all my stuff to myself. And I thought that was the right way to go about it. And then I realized that a lot of my students, they didn't care. So I was like, well, I'm going to go out and I'll put a lot more stuff out there, and I'll make a DVD, and I'll do this or I'll do that. And at the end of the day, it's become like goal setting, just constant goal setting and constant wanting to do something better each time. And so I think though the injuries, though the training has slowed down for me a great bit, people don't realize, like, I'll show a technique maybe 7 times, and nobody really realizes that I'm actually drilling the technique. It's like I'm doing. So when I show a technique, that's for me. Like that I'm explaining it for them, but when I go through the movements, that's for me. And that's for me to feel it. And I don't like to do it. I like to keep going until it's clean. And that's a kind of an odd situation when your body's not functioning the way that you remember it to be. So you're like, I'm used to, so like if you slept on your hand and then you took a shower and you rubbed your like soap on your head, you're like, this doesn't feel right. Like I've washed my hair every single night, or I've you don't wash your hair, but you know what I'm talking about. It's something along those lines of something that you do every
You prick.
Yeah, well, I'm bringing up shampoo to a bald guy. I apologize.
Oh, God damn it.
But it's like one of those things that you're so used to the feeling of something, and then it changes, and then you have to make the new normal, and you hope it gets better, or you hope you just get used to it, to where like right now, I know my arms are different than what they were when I was healthy, but now they're feel normal, and so it's that kind of thing where you just got to wait for the back to feel normal. Like, yeah, okay, I can do jiu-jitsu like this without it feeling gross, because I think that's the biggest thing is just, like when you get into those drilling and those movements and those, like, when you're starting looking at higher level jiu-jitsu, it's that clean feeling that you're getting something. It's not the struggle back and forth, or like you're missing. It's just a bunch of connections. So I assume that's a lot like baseball, basketball, football, where, if you lose sensation in your arm and you try to catch a football, it doesn't ever feel right, So one of those things I think is that I went from MMA, injured myself, decided to do gi, injured myself, decided to go one more through with the competition in gi, and then I started coaching just heavily. And from there, then I was like, okay, I'm going to open an academy. Did that. Okay, now I'm going to try to get my material out to other people. And so it's just a constant like Rolodex of points I want to be at in my life. And
so you've talked about you adapted your game to what your body would give you. It sounds like you're adapting your your coaching, and I would almost say business plan, or your means of distribution of, the technique that you've learned and that you're, working on devising and stuff. Because originally it was with the intention of having an academy. And then, like you said, you wanted to keep your secrets. And then that changed, and you decided to open it up. And thanks for that. Being honest, like the Heisengard specifically is something that I've gotten a ton of mileage out of. And like I'm not a very acrobatic player. I have some injuries. I'm just, my level of athleticism is fairly low. But with something with like the Heisengard, from a bit of distance, I can be effective and dangerous to someone who's posturing. And that's hard if you're not kind of quick. So that's been a real booster to my game. And, I'm, like I said, I'm thankful that you put that out, because it's really had an effect on the way that I play, because it's given me a tool that I'm not going to say athleticism is required to have, when someone's far away, but it sure helps,
Right. No, and that's the reason why I do it, is that, I'm only touching the people, like only reaching the people in my community, or at least my gym. And like, I don't know, it just became kind of a thing where not looking for validation as much as I'm looking for, to affect people, and I think that's a big thing, is that, as a coach, as a teacher, the more people that you affect, even if it's not your own students as much as it's other people. Like, man, to tell you the truth, I get a lot more appreciation out in the internet than I do with my own students sometimes, just because this is what I do. I explain into deep depth. I go into here, I talk about this. A lot of the guys started with me. And all the guys that started with me have no idea how other gyms are taught. It's like they don't realize that they don't get to ask all the questions that they want. They don't realize they get to, hey, can you finish this? They just drill and the coach walks by. And if you're doing it wrong and they don't think that you're going to be able to do it, they don't tell you. This is just like, they're not going to waste their, like, I don't know whether it's their academy or not their academy. Mainly sometimes it's the guys whose academy, they don't own it. They're just working there. There's like, this ain't worth my time. Like, I did the class, this guy's screwing it up. He wasn't coming in for the past week. I'm not helping him. And I have like a hero mentality kind of sometimes, is that I want even people that I know are almost, I'm not going to say Judas, but almost, like people that my stability in my life, or the gym stability doesn't mean as much to them as it means to the person right next to them. But it doesn't mean I'm not going to make sure their jiu-jitsu is right. And that's like one of the things, is that, I get barked at a bunch about, like, hey man, you're this guy's an asshole. I'm like, yeah, he's an asshole, but he's on our team. It's like, that's kind of like the, I mean, it is what it is. They're like, people are assholes, and they can change, but they're going to, for the time being, while they're paying me for jiu-jitsu, I'm going to be what I naturally am. And that's somebody that gives a bunch.
Yeah.
I like perfection. I like holding people to perfection, and even if it's not attainable, trying to get there, it's going to be better,
Well, that passion for training and perfection, and just like you said, making things clean, reminds me of an interview that we did with an instructor by the name of Rob Bernanke. And
I know Rob. Yeah, he's an awesome guy.
He really is. And one thing that he said was hard for him, and he lost students initially to this, is that he felt, because people are paying him to teach jiu-jitsu at the highest level, at his highest ability, he would be correcting people, and sometimes they would feel almost like bullied or singled out or called out by him. And he said it took him a long time to realize that there is a contingent, it's a small contingent, but they do exist, of people who just pay to come to jiu-jitsu class and roll with their buddies. And they're going to improve. They're not going to improve at an optimal rate, but they're going to improve, and they're there to blow off steam and have fun. And he said initially it was basically impossible for him to tolerate that. And then over time, he came to realize that, you know, even though that's not how he would do it, or what he would consider his ideal, it's not bad or wrong. And, you know, it in a way, it's almost like a little bit of a break. Like, he knows this guy, if he tries to correct him too much, it's going to be, you know, a little bit of a pain. So he's just like, hey, good job, try this, and, you know, see if you can make that a little bit different. So, you know, he's like, it helps pay the bills to have that attitude a little bit. But it was very hard for him. It was not natural, because he felt like it was his mission statement to teach jiu-jitsu at the highest, you know, possible, you know, the highest level his brain was possible of doing.
It sucks when you're teaching and you see people zoning out, or like, you know, and you're like, and you know, it's like, if I'm impressed with what I'm doing, it means I've hit something special. Sometimes I completely go into like my tangents, and I'm going through my ruminations, and I'm just thinking. All of a sudden, I'm like, this is good. I said it to myself, you know, I'm like, this is good. And you look around and you just see just blank, like you'll see one or two guys that are like, they're getting it. And you'll look over and you'll see like, these guys just don't give a shit. You could have, I mean, this should be an assault. Like, and I'm not overly cocky on my stuff as much as I am knowing that I give a ton and I understand a lot about what I'm telling the people. But if I impress myself while I'm teaching, I know that they have not seen this. You know, it's like, because I've seen it. I've seen as much things as I can possibly get my hands on. You know, there's not much that I haven't seen or can't make or can't deconstruct concept wise. And then you look at the guy just go like, and you're like, oh, F nut, you know, we're going to be training in 10 minutes. Okay. Can you wait 10 minutes before you suck at jiu-jitsu for me?
Oh, man. I can hear my instructor's voice in what you're saying so many times. And look, Malachy, I'm not someone who doesn't pay attention. I do. Like, I am addicted to this. I love it. But I am slow to understand, very slow. And so my instructor, I'm not making this up. This was the joke, you know, like for the first almost year, my instructor, when he would look at me and I'd be doing something, if he wanted me to take my right hand and move it to the left, he'd go, now, Harrison, you're going to take your left hand and you're going to move it to the right. And I would do that wrong, but it would be right because he mind fucked me, you know, because it's just like thing was backwards. I just could not make sense of it. So I can see the frustration on his face, because it was like, man, I'm giving you gold here and you're just not getting it.
I think sometimes people don't understand that even if the technique is outside of their limits of what they're capable of implementing in a real or even a real rolling scenario, you know, not even talking about tournament scenario, is that I always try to say, like, if there's one thing you should understand, is that if I'm underneath my opponent, I'm okay. Like not if my opponent's not in my guard, not if my opponent's on side control. If I'm between my opponent's legs, whether it's deep half, whether it's X guard, whether it's just me scooting in and sitting right underneath him, I am in probably the best possible position I can be in, right? So above all else, you want to be under your opponent's hips, making him move, or spreading out his legs to where they can't extend farther, or whether you're deep half and you're straightening out a large lever like the leg. I'm like, I don't care if you can get there. I want you to understand why it works like this. It works like this because of this, you know, and the reason why you would allow your leg loose. So like so if I'm teaching deep half guard and the guy on top can't understand what I need him to do, I say, listen, all I want you to understand is that if you keep your legs bent when somebody tries to go into deep half, you're going to get swept. And so the reason why you're going into deep half is because deep half is safer than letting somebody sweep you. You know, so it's like you're still in guard. There's still attacks. You can still pass the guard here. It's a harder guard to pass than just an open guard with no grips. No, your leg is straightened out. It's not what you want. It's not where you want to be. You got to do a lot of maintenance here, but understand, like, if I'm going to be a good drilling partner, I understand, like, okay, this is, if I'm putting deep half guard, I got to let my leg loose. I got to let the mechanics kind of take play and then figure things out from there, and that's where you talk about any high level technique, there is a basic foundation somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's the grip, whether it's controlling, whether it's which way you rotate once your opponent starts trying to pass your guard. I mean, it's something as simple as like high knee, low leg, and then the person starts going the other way. You switch. I'm looking at myself too much. All right, let me not look at the camera. So it's like here, this guy's going this way. Now all of a sudden you got to switch it to this way because the guy's rotating this way and that way. So if he's going like this, your knees have to change because you have to filter him through your guard. You can't let him filter behind your guard. So it's just simple concepts like that I go like, hey, this is like, I understand you're having trouble with, you're not getting it right now. And I try to make all my team, my students drill what they've already gone over in class. So we don't do, like, for my classes, we don't do warm-ups. I've done away with warm-ups because it kills about 10 to 15 minutes of my class. And I think that warming up can be put into a better usage of drilling. So like just slow drilling, moving. Because we're not going to go right into like if you go and run around the gym 40 times, and then I stop you, I say, okay, let's go over a technique. I mean, you're already getting cold there anyways. Why should I, it's like that kind of that warm up was the way I screwed everybody else. Now they're cold. Now they got to go back to the rolling, so it's
Right.
kind of did away with that and make my guys drill stuff. And a lot of them don't do it. It's like they want to work on the crab ride, but they're going to get swept from deep half every single time. And it's a time and a place for every position to better, but you might as well do it on the same calendar that I'm on. It's like, hey, we'll do bear and bolos later. Like I'll if you're having a problem with the guy in the gym with bear and bolos, I'll show you some quick fixes. But let's look at this. Let's deep dive into this. Like we've been deep diving into deep half guard and the knee shield guard, and even if it's something as simple with a knee shield, is creating frames that work off of your body and also their body as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so like structures and talking about like, well, I'm never going to bend the end of my knee, right? Bend the end of my knee. I'm going to do something stupid, I think. My knee to my hip. My knee to my hip only does not bend. It only rotates like this, a little bit like that. And so it's a structure. I can't, if that knee is up in the air, right? I can't move around that knee. I'm going to have to move myself back and try to hook the heel and bring the leg out straight. Now, once that leg's straight, now they're in trouble. That's just the same idea. So if I go for a single leg and I straighten that leg out in deep half, that's what I want to do. I want to get this person to where they're less mobile than I am,
Mm-hmm.
and so that I can turn, twist back, whatever else. But I'm not, if I come up on a single and I'm coming up straight to the knee, man, that knee's not going to go anywhere. I got to attack a weaker lever, which is going to be the heel, the rotational of that's going to control the rotation of the knee. That's going to control the rotation of the hip. It's kind of stuff like that where it's like, I don't care if you get the move right. I want you to understand why this works, why this would be something that needs to be in your brain. Just detail, because it's later you're like, oh shit, that was what I'm talking about.
What you were describing there, where you're trying to pass along the conceptual framework of why things work, not just saying this is the move, do it the way I do it.
Right.
Reminds me of an interview that we had with Brian Friedman. And Brian is an adaptive athlete. He had an accident in the Navy that gave him some paralysis in his legs. And so his body, won't give him the same things that, a completely able-bodied person's would.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was really fortunate to number one, be a self-starter and someone who was really willing to do deep dives into things to figure out how he could find some way to accomplish what his instructor was trying to teach him, even if he couldn't do it, in the normal way. But also his instructor was willing to, spend time with him either in private lessons or before and after class to figure out ways that he could do stuff with what his body was capable of that would abide by those fundamental, principles. So I like what you're saying is like you're giving not just, hey, this is the technique as, it's been taught to me. You're saying this is what makes it work. This is the biomechanics or even the, the principle of leverage, whatever, that makes this maximally effective. Now, let's say, somebody's less mobile than, one person's more mobile or less mobile, or maybe somebody's stronger or weaker. We can find a way for your body with your particular abilities and needs to abide by those principles. And it might be different than my way. It might be different than Malachy's way, but that doesn't matter. As long as we're abiding by those principles, we're still going to accomplish the same thing. We're still doing that single.
You're really correct in the fact that once you understand what makes a technique. A technique is something that is a bunch of concepts grouped together in order and is able to be drilled. That's basically what a technique is. I mean, a triangle is a submission. It's not a technique. There's 1,000 ways to hit the triangle. Those are all concept based to get there. When you look at something like half guard, it's like, well, half guard is bad, right? They're almost half past my guard. Well, you're also halfway to his back. You're also, if you roll underneath him, you're halfway underneath him. And people don't really understand that when you see something in jiu-jitsu that doesn't make complete amount of sense or it doesn't look like a technique, it's just a group of concepts that they're picking from at that exact moment. Because I believe that the subconscious mind at some point turns into less of, oh, I have to hit this move like this, and it goes into, how do I cheat all concepts to get there first? And you can cheat a lot. It all depends on your opponent. But sometimes you see guys do insane stuff that they shouldn't get away with. It's because they're shortening the concept just slightly, or they're taking that drillable thing where you go like, okay, you get up, you just put your arm behind you, grab their elbow, you hip heist in, and they skip the first two. All they did was they went straight up to their straight arm. And it's cheating concepts like that at the highest level that you can get away with sometimes, or that you need to do, because if you do go all through all those steps in the same time, they're going to be countered because that person has to do less to counter it than you have to do to make it work. And so that's a technique too. I could that way, but I would rather understand what I need from him, what my opponent needs for me not to do, and what I need to do, and what I need to take away from my opponent. And like, those are just constant battles. My head is like, somebody has a question like, well, what if I do this? And I don't have the answer. I'll just go right into it and be like, all right, let's look at it. And it's like, it's like, I've been around long enough to be able to make up shit. You're just like, it's like, this limb here, while you're killing this part of my game, I can move this limb or this lever over here and tilt you over top of me, and now I can sit up. And now because I'm better than you, everything else is going to go really poorly for you after that. And it's like, so I only need to move your hips one time in the direction that you don't want to go, or the direction you're being heavy in one direction, and I move you on top of me, and I can now slide underneath you. It's like, well, now the race is on, because not only did I get rid of one thing you needed, but I gave myself things, and I know more than you do. And I think the whole idea of a drillable technique needs to be, they need to do it, but they need to more be conscious of mechanics involved, because I mean, I can't tell you how much stuff I get away with that only has to do with the mechanics of the body. Certain things that are weak on the body, like a knee bar. This was many years ago that I spoke with Laborio. And of course it would have been something stupid and simple, and I think everybody would realize this now, but if I can turn my toe, I can turn my knee. So if I can turn my toes, then I can turn my knee. And so like that was a defense, but then I started going like, well, if I'm putting on a knee bar, what do I need to do? Whether or not this person knows the technique or not, I need to take away rotational of the foot so that the knee cannot rotate when I'm attacking it. And goes like, well, I'm going to use that for every knee bar I finish. So there's no, like, even if I'm holding it with my hand, or if I'm putting it against my neck, or I'm putting, you know, like, however I'm doing this, whether I'm diamonding the back to where like there's another, I'll have to go over that later because I won't be able to explain it. But there's so many ways to stop the rotation of the foot so that I can stop the rotation of the knee, so I can lock out the hip so that I can finish the knee bar, you know. And I think that was a big thing is understanding the offense and defense of each technique and saying, well, if I need a Kimura sweep, how do I stop somebody who's Kimura sweeping me? Well, he needs these 3 things to happen. At least 3 out of 5 he needs, right? He may need 5 out of 5 if I'm world champion, and then something else. But it goes, well, if I take 2 things away from him, can he get the job done? No, he can't get the job done with just one thing. And so I try to take some things off his plate and see where he goes. So it's a counter punching dance. And I think a lot of athletes, a lot of times they go into the like me first, rather than just like, shut up, dude, chill for a second. Let him make a mistake. Like, you're not going to be able to pass the guard, go to side control, and go to mount without that person giving you those positions because of defense. They realize they don't want to be in mount, so they're having to. So you start attacking something else, then you step over. There's a certain amount of activity you need from an opponent in jiu-jitsu, and on the counter side of that, for self-defense, that's the opposite. You know what I mean? Like, so I remember probably getting into one fight since training jiu-jitsu, and it was, the guy was strong. He was doing a lot of stupid, weird stuff. I just held him down. I took him down. I got on top of him. This was like so many years ago. Maybe I was 23, 22. And I realized like this, I'm not going to do anything because I can't assume. That's the biggest thing I think we do as jiu-jitsu athletes, is that we assume the person is going to do something like this. And then once we assume that the person's not going to want us to take their back, we go into a street fight and you try to take the back and that guy just stands up. Well, that wasn't what was supposed to happen. I mean, they don't understand jiu-jitsu. They don't know the rules of the game you're playing. So you got to break it down so mechanically and that you're doing the most efficient job as you move along into those attacks.
You know what you said about putting principles together and then sort of improvising and skipping moves in the sequence. You know, that reminds me a lot of when Ronda Rousey was still in the UFC. You would see her, kind of do these improvised arm bars, and they would just look weird as hell. And they would come out of these funky positions, and it's like no teacher has ever taught an arm bar that looked like that one. But she's practiced arm bars so much, so often, that she has a physical within the sensations of her body, an understanding of how the arm bar is supposed to look and feel. And so she can, just create on the fly an arm bar that isn't, for the rest of us, probably wouldn't have been there. Now, obviously, there were some issues with her whole game, but that one aspect of her game was so well internalized that she didn't need the high quality setup or all the things that you could counter. She just needed to be able to lock your arm in place and start to bend it farther than it was supposed to. And that sounded to me like what you were saying is as you were talking about, okay, if I get under your hips and like this one spot, then it's going to be bad for you. And I don't have to have a move here. It's like I've already got the move. We don't have a name for it. It's just
right.
Adjusting to this situation based on the principles at play.
Yeah, and I think that's 100%. And Ronda Rousey does her arm bars differently than the way I like to do my arm bars. She legs and but the funny thing is that my friend Cole, he crosses his legs and opens his knees on every arm bar. And there's a weird like if if I could break it down mechanically, I would. But if I flare my legs open and cross them, my opponent can't rotate their thumb or their arm. And then you go, okay, that's the same thing I was talking about with the knee bar. If I cross my legs, open my knees in a diamond shape, and I get like about half of the butt cheek in place, like with my legs, they can't rotate their knees. So now I don't have to overly compensate on the foot like I was before, and now I can do it. There's so many, like, and I'm not going to ever be the guy that reads all the anatomy books, because I just don't want to. I'd rather just like be like, this works because watch, and but in jiu-jitsu, it's kind of funny how you find these things throughout your training. You're like, hey, that looks a lot like that. That's, like these two are very similar. They're related to one another, just like the kimura, the omoplata, the triangle, the head and arm triangle. It's like so many things that we did wrong, and it's like, I got Kimbo ready. I woke up Kimbo always liked to go to the gym at 3 a.m. Like, yeah, that's what time we worked out. We worked out at 3 a.m. We were the night of his fight. I'm like, man, we went over a bunch of leg lock stuff. I said, but we didn't go over the back and rear naked choke defense. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna. I was like, hey man, I'm done learning. So listen, if I let you, like, he had, I guess they call him bodyguards. He brings security with him, because he's probably one of the most famous people that you could possibly imagine. Like, you walk into the airport with him was just ridiculous. It's like there's no hiding who that guy is.
Yeah.
And so, it's just, and that's the funniest thing is that, he's not so wealthy that he's flying on private jets everywhere. Mm-hmm. He's middle, he wanted his whole family there, so they took a regular commercial flight, and say something. I said, okay, what if I allow this guy to put lock in and choke on me? Locks in the choke, I get out. He goes, oh, let the other guy do it, and I get out. And then he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, man, this is what I think. I said, Ken Shamrock has only been working with guys that he worked with in the past. He's getting the old lines done together. What have those guys done? Absolutely nothing since about 1997. Like maybe 2003, 2004, you might have had like a one or two guys, but we planned on the hand. So like, our rear naked choke goes like this. You know what you're doing, you go through, you slide it in. And we kind of figured that the way that the guys were doing it, they were going to go triangle, head on top. And I'm like, this is the concept, man. This is what it's going to be. If we get there, you have to peel the hand off the head, and you got to turn in. And funny enough is it happened that, like, about I don't know how many hours are from 3 a.m. to 11 o'clock at night, but whatever time we were doing that, it was funny because it showed itself up. It's kind of like those techniques and those principles are still being done at MMA level, but when you get guys like Maya, or you get guys like Rodolfo Vieira, it's going to be a much different course. It's like you're going to have to game plan for every opponent, and I think that was it's one of those things like that.
Well, what's interesting there about what you were saying too is like when Masvidal fought Damian Maia, he took his back, and Masvidal just locked his hands in his armpits and just did not let him finish him, and he won that fight. And like a lot of jiu-jitsu guys was like, oh, he's just he's stalling, blah blah blah. It's like, no, he's not getting the crap beat out of him. He's winning. Like, that's what's wrong with that, and that's that same thing. Like, if I'm betting that was game planned as well. That was not an accident or an improvised idea. They said, in their camp, I'm sure they watched tape of Maya taking the back and stuff, and it's like, if he gets to the body lock, just lock his arms in place.
Yeah, and the body lock as good as it is to keep the back, it ties you into your opponent as well. You know, it doesn't give you the rotation that you would like to have trying to fight for the neck. You know, like you can come at the neck from a lot of different angles, but if you body triangle somebody, you're locked wherever your hips are or where your hips stay. You know, and that's kind of like why I try not to have my fighters go body triangle unless it's the very end of the round. You know, we don't need to over squeeze or over fight for it. But it's one of those things is that, you know, like I'm studying a little bit of Volkanovski and watching how he dealt with Chad Mendes. And it's something as simple as not letting Chad Mendes, when he took his back, get his hands locked together. You know, it was just constant, like one hand here holding, and then he was able to slide out. You know, and that's a huge thing, is that if I can't lock my hands, I really don't have any control of the underhook or the top overhook and attempt to choke. So it's something as simple as that. Like, man, we teach like grab the hand, put the elbow inside, go for the other hand. And this guy just went immediately to both hands as they were coming in and just separated them. And it's like, yeah, that sucks, man. You're going to have some trouble here. Like, if you can't free your hands out of this position, this is not going to work out well for you. You're going to be overworking. They're going to be underworking. And you never want to be that on the efficient side of fighting or martial arts, is the person that's putting out too much output and fatiguing himself. You know, and so there's so many things that I know that sometimes I have to watch and be reminded of why it works, or am I teaching something simple, but something that's so simple that can be simplified? Am I teaching it too much of a complex version of it? You know, and because not all my athletes or fighters have the feeling that I have in there, like what I know is right, or I can just make shit up on the fly, is that the adrenaline's pumping, you're having shock almost that you're going to maybe finish the fight, or you're going to get finished. You got knocked down hard and they took you back. Is that something as simple as he cannot choke you or control your body if he cannot lock his hands together? And it's something super simple like that goes, okay, well, let's stop working on these other defenses, because this is a more MMA mindset defense, you know, because the heat is on. It's not like you get the 4 points, so you can just be like, you know, float through. No, this guy who you have the back of is, if he turns around, he's on top of you with elbows, with everything else. And it's like, so a lot of times I watch fights and I think, man, their jiu-jitsu is garbage, you know, and then other times I look at them and I say, their jiu-jitsu is so basic that it's working, you know, because they're having to do it at the most point of the fight. And something that I think you would agree with is that, like, you can game plan for the fight, but when the fight doesn't go according to the game plan, you have about 45 seconds to try to tell your fighter what adjustments to make. You know, and watching The Last Dance with the Bulls and their six trophies with Michael Jordan, it was that the Bulls had bad games, you know, and they had bad games, and you see them go back, and you see them talking to Phil, you see them talking with one another, you hear their thoughts on the process, and they get to regroup and come back. Like, so if they won, which they shouldn't have, you know, they're like, this was our problem. This is how we we change things. And in a fight, we don't get those. You know, it's like you get a one-shot crack at the game plan, and then from then on, you were making small adjustments because you can't entirely change the fight. You can't sub another fighter in there. You can't go like, well, this guy's a really good wrestler. I'm going to sub in my wrestler who has good wrestling defense.
Right.
No, we got to make this work for ourselves. We're getting taken down all the time. Where's he making a mistake that we can employ some other thing that we haven't done yet? You know, that my fighter actually knows, because my fighter can't know everything I know. You know, it's just, he's going to know some things I don't. I'll know some things he won't know, but we got to come to an understanding within 45 seconds of what we need to get done in order to get the second round or to get the third round, you know. And it's funny because I like game planning. I like this, and I wish there was a way of playing almost like a season, like, you know, like the playoffs would be like, you know, somebody like Kamaru Usman and George Masvidal, best out of three. And, you know, you set 1, 2, and 3. You see, man, now you see the IQ, because there's so many guys that lost or shouldn't have lost, or they tactical error, and you figured it out. You're like, that would have never happened. That shouldn't have happened to me that way. I was gun shy with my right hand. That you don't get to look at the tape until later and be like, oh, look at this. This is what happened. But we're never going to fight this guy again.
Right.
You know, or if we do, it's because it's a big money fight, or it's a long time down the road. We're both different fighters, or it was a championship fight that was close. So you get Max. So that's why I'm watching a lot of Max Holloway and Volkanovski, is that they have a rematch set. And so I'm going in there with the coach's mind and game planning for myself, like I was game planning for either Volk or Max. And it's interesting because Volkanovski's really good, you know, and Max is really, really, really good, but he's also has a Diaz default. You know, the Diaz brothers don't check kicks. And it's like, man.
They stay heavy on that front leg.
Because they're pressure fighters. They're pressuring you against the fence. And Volkanovski never let Max hold him against the fence. Never went into multiple exchanges with Holloway until that guy's legs were just busted up. He had no mobility. He had to fight southpaw. It was like one of those things where it's like, yeah, I mean, that plan of beating up that front leg and then never getting stuck against the cage was fantastic. And now Max has to go and go like, how do I fight this guy? This guy is not going to let me trap him. He's not going to let me do what I'm really good at, which is box with him and pressure him and make him fatigued because he thinks he's getting hit with 1,000 punches. And those are Diaz-style fighting trademarks. You know, it's like they're in your face, You're thinking, then you realize you're really tired because you're thinking too much.
Right.
You know, and Volkanovski in that entire fight didn't let that happen. You know, it didn't matter if Max landed something, Volkanovski was out. All the way out, started over. You know, it's like, man, it's hard to get started with a guy like that. You know, how do you game plan? And we'll see. I don't think Max. I think Volkanovski's kind of Max's kryptonite. You know, with the styles, and it doesn't mean Max isn't one of the best ever. I think anybody that can beat Volkanovski, Max could beat better. I just don't think Max matches up well with Volkanovski. So it's those strange little areas where it's like, well, if I am the coach of Max Holloway and my job depends on this, right? Like Max goes back to being, you know, the blessed one and the one with all the belts and the paydays and everything else. And if we don't fight, we're on a slide. You know, people don't realize this isn't like, you know, like where you have a term contract where you're guaranteed to make this amount of money. Even if you're injured, you're guaranteed this amount of money. He goes, no, man, as soon as the negotiations come back, guess what? You're getting less pie, you're getting less everything else. Maybe Max leaves. Maybe Max, I don't see him leaving, but you know, you see it all the time where they lose 2 fights in a row and they switch camps entirely. And then they have success against a lesser guy. And they say, oh, it's because of my training. And then they get the shit kicked out of them, you know, 2 months later. It's like, you just never know who's where, you know?
You know, that reminds me of something. It was a recent book by Malcolm Gladwell, and I can't remember the title of it. I'll look it up and put it in the show notes, and I'll shoot you a message about it.
Okay.
But he had interviewed a pair of Israeli psychologists who helped the Israeli military train its fighter pilots. And what when they did this analysis, they found that the instructors thought that they were geniuses, right? Which, hey,
Right.
if you're a jet jockey, the Israeli Air Force has done a pretty good job, historically. So, you got reason to believe that you're doing a good job. But what they were finding was that the instructors, when a student would have a really great lesson, right, they would give that student praise, and then the student would do shitty the next lesson.
Right.
And then when the student had a bad lesson, they would yell at them, and then the student would have a good lesson later. So they said, well, obviously praise doesn't work. We need to quit praising people. So the psychologists were sitting there, and they're looking around, and they're going, okay, but what is this person's baseline ability, right? So what you said, when the person like has a couple of losses, they switch camps and then they win to somebody who maybe it's a better style matchup, or maybe it's a lesser fighter, whatever. They're certain that their camp is what did it, and then so they stick with that guy, or that camp or whatever, and then they meet back up with the person that was a stylistic problem for them, and they lose again. What these guys called that was reversion to the mean, meaning that at any given day, you might just be Michael Jordan in a fighter jet. Now, you don't actually have that. You're not actually that good. It was just that this particular day, something, clicked with you and you performed above your actual abilities.
Right.
And then some other day, maybe your dog barfed in the floor all night, and you were up, cleaning up dog barf in your house, and, you didn't have a great flight. Well, you're also not that bad, right? That's not your actual ability. The mean, where you're actually at, is where most of your flights were going to be.
Right.
And that's regardless of whatever the instructor said. So they could praise you every single flight, and you'd still be, pretty close to the mean. You'd have some good ones, you'd have some bad ones. Or they could yell at you every flight, and the same thing would happen. So, they chided these instructors to ignore their instincts, and their past, kind of confirmation bias, because what was being confirmed was not that their methods were working, but that their pilots were pretty darn good, right? Like, pilots in general fly pretty well. So they have these occasional Michael Jordan flights, and they have these occasional shitty flights, but on the mean, mostly pretty okay. So that changed their training. And then what they were trying to solve for was a cost problem, because military airplanes are extremely expensive to operate. Like, take the F-16, I think for every flight hour, it takes 5 hours of maintenance. So you want to minimize the flight hours, meaning you want to maximize training effectiveness, because every hour is very costly, globally, not just,
Right.
You and the student, but also the operation of that airplane. So they made their training more efficient in that they would recognize that, okay, if I scream at this guy, it actually doesn't make him any better the next flight. He's just going to revert to the mean. So what I need to do is give him, something tangible that he can work to correct, and then the recognition that he's probably better than he was today. And if he does super good, what I want to do is say, hey, tomorrow probably ain't going to be as great as it was today. And that's okay. We're going to, keep working with you, but awesome job today. And, we're going to get what we can tomorrow. And so they had like a 22% reduction in flight hours per training course, just from this change in style. And it was just purely recognition that your pilots are pretty good, but they're never as good or as bad as they seem on any individual flight. There's a continuum that they flow on. And that sounds exactly like what you were saying with fighters. It's like switching to camps, that didn't do it.
Yeah.
You were the same fighter, like it was a style matchup, or maybe you had a bad night or whatever, you lost. That happens,
Right.
But that doesn't mean that you were as bad as you were that night. It's just you got caught. It's not, we don't have a best of 3, best of 5.
Yeah, exactly. You don't get to kind of run it back and be like, hey, let's collect ourselves. We weren't expecting for him to go that many times to the leg. We got to say we took too much, we led too much in the fight where we pushed the pace and we should have waited for him. I mean, there's all these things that would have done, and you get one shot at it. And if it's a title fight, you get 5. You don't even get 5 minutes. You get less than 5 minutes to get into the ring, talk to your fighter, don't scream at him for 45 seconds of something that he cannot remember. You know, and sometimes you can't even give the guy the information you would like to, because the guy is getting punched in the head an awful lot. You know, and if you're really, really sliding on that fight and you're really doing poorly, it's like you don't tell him, I need this, this, and this, because he's too busy trying not to fucking die. You know,
Right.
he's I
The
mean, that's
opponent.
just yeah, Tony Ferguson, man, jeez. And, you know, and that's sad because Tony Ferguson was such a good fighter. You know, he deserved Khabib. He did. He deserved Khabib. He deserved to have that shot. He had a really good chance of beating Khabib because he's a durable fighter. He's a good wrestler. He's a good striker. He can wear a lot of damage and keep going. And it would have been hard for Khabib to keep that pace on somebody that won't go away. You know, and then you see a guy like Gaethje just dismantle him, and then not only dismantle him, but fought completely different than he fought any other fight, which was patient. He was patient.
Mm-hmm.
And like, here you go, you're thinking you're just going to get into a slugfest with this guy, and here he is, patient. He's not committing. He's throwing hard, heavy shots, but man, he's not doing the other dumb stuff where, like, when he gets hit, he just drops his hands and starts slugging back and forth. He was very composed. And how do you train for when every other fight tells you this is how he's going to do it, and then he does it a different way?
And Tony been in camp, what was it, 4 or 5 times training for Khabib. So, you know, he's been drilling into his muscle memory all these responses to Khabib movements, and then he gets, you know, Gaethje. You know, talking about Gaethje, that reminded me of what you were saying. You know, in between rounds, you get 45 seconds. I thought it was brilliant the way Gaethje's coaches, when he came in, he was either after the first or the second round. His coach goes, "Hey, I need you to take 10% off your punches. You know, this is not a 3-round fight."
Yeah.
And such a simple but effective piece of advice. You know, you can't rebuild the game plan, but you might be down a little bit. I really, really thought that was brilliant. That says a lot about those coaches, because they weren't given, you know, crazy high tech advice. Just get 10% off. We're going to be going 5 rounds tonight.
Right. And on top of that, you know, it's you know, I'm not sure why people, you know, I'm not sure the game plan of what Khabib has. I'm not even sure if Gaethje is going to fight Khabib, or if he's going to fight Conor, or whatever it is. But it's one of those things where, like, man, if you were Ferguson, you were expecting a dogfight, and you didn't get a dogfight. You got somebody who normally is impatient, somebody. And I hate to say this because I think she's a very, very nice girl, and she's, of course, one of the best in the entire world. But I think there's a game plan for Amanda Nunes. You know, the game plan for Amanda Nunes is to piss her off. She's very, very good. She's very heavy-handed. She's got okay groundwork, but she every time she gets hit in the face, she wants to get that back immediately. You know what I mean? And I don't know if there's a girl that has the ability to absorb those punches that you're going to get. If you're in a fight and you're going against Amanda Nunes, thinking that you're not going to get hit at all is a very stupid, you know, mindset as a coach. But to go, hey, every time you tagged her, she jumped right back into your face. It was almost like, nope, you're not getting away with one on me. And it's like, those are things that deep rooted in a fighter, you know, and it takes a lot of finessing your fighters to stop doing things that may have worked for them in the past, but will not always work because you are flirting with danger. If every time I blitz you and I hit you with a right, and I know within a quarter of a second you're coming right back at me, that gives me enough time to move out of the way and then come right back in. And it's just, there's just not a girl. I think there is a girl. You know, I think Jermaine Desjardins, or whatever her name was. Yeah, she has the ability to beat Nunes. She just sucked at take. It's like she was kicking ass that whole fight. She just lost it on the sitting on her back. And had she a little bit of better wrestling, scrambling, at least making Nunes earn the instead of closing guard, make her earn it and take her hands from hitting you, make her hands go to your hips or go, underhook or pressure. I think it would have been a different fight because she, in my opinion, she outfought her on her feet. And I'm like, this is something that every camp should be looking at, going like, hey, this is legitimate openness here. It's like, even though she hits like a tank, even though she's getting better, and then there's some people that like you just don't know how to prepare for. It's like, how do you prepare for let me think somebody who's stellar right now and maybe not even a champion. How do you prepare for Conor McGregor if you're not a world-class wrestler? That guy is one of the fastest start. So in my opinion, you don't do shit with him in the first round. Stay the hell away. Just get on your, because he's one of the fastest starters in MMA. Fastest starters in MMA. He's one of the guys that like that was a perfect matchup for him to fight Cowboy. Because Cowboy is probably one of the slowest starters. He looks and he didn't look terrible movement wise when I saw him, but usually he looks like a stiff old man in that first round, and then all of a sudden juice start flowing, he starts to become a little bit more like water, and it's like, no, the people that Jose Aldo was on the we see Jose Aldo as human now. We see all the people that beat him, how close his peak is, I think, over, and maybe Conor just caught Jose at the end of his peak. And then you go, okay, here so then you got the rematch with Nate, which like those are still the toughest fights that Conor's been in, besides the Khabib fight. But you go, okay, Eddie Alvarez. How many times does Eddie Alvarez get knocked on his ass in the first round? Almost every single fight he's been knocked down in the first round. So you get a faster. So of course he's a two-time champ. He's gotten very lucky with good fighters, but guys that fall right into his pocket. So it's like, is a patient Gaethje even a good idea? So it's like one of those ideas. It's like one of those things where, man, a little bit of luck, a little bit of figuring out, well, if I can't take Conor down, this is going to be an issue.
Right.
And if I can't match power for power, and I can't get past the first round, it's like, I think you got to drop the first and second round and hopefully kick it up in the third, fourth, and fifth. But those are all game plans. If I put that out there for my fighter and it didn't go that way, that would be fucked up. We don't get another try at that.
Right.
So it's the same thing when I'm helping guys for jiu-jitsu. I know that when we're going into IBJJF, I know that when we're preparing for something that we may lose just because the referee decided we lost. And those are the hardest ones to deal with, is because there's no overtime. It's just, if it's the finals, there's 3 refs, but other than that, you go like, well, what did he see? Well, he saw that the guy was on top. Well, did he see me looking for collar jokes on him? I mean, that's the thing I hate, is like guys spam stuff. You see how often people will turn for footlocks. It's like, because they're just trying to get that one advantage. That one advantage that's going to move them along. And this other guy, who's legitimately the best in the world, doesn't get to fight for best in the world because of an advantage or because of a referee decision. I think, there's just so many. I almost feel like jiu-jitsu should be like soccer, where the bell rings and somebody rolls a dice, and it's like 3 minutes left. So you go like, it's even, It's, like, let's say if somebody's up by an advantage, okay, you get 1 minute and 30 seconds, because an advantage is not a point, it's an attempt. Where you go, they're both tied, you roll a friggin' dice, it says 4, and you say, well, that's too much. You say, okay, well, whatever. You have like 1, 2, 3, like 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Roll the dice, however, whatever it rolls to, those people have to keep going. And that's it. Like almost like because then people know, like, hey, this is 0-0. I got to show out right now. This has got to be it. You know what I mean? And I think times go by too fast, and too many guys are able to win off that advantage or win off that last second 50-50. They come up, or just something, the toe hold, something ridiculous that they walk away with. And like I honestly believe Keenan Cornelius got robbed at the World Championships. It was flat out robbery, and there's nothing you can do. Who do you talk to? They don't do instant replays. Their decision's word of God. And what do you do in that situation? You worked all year to get to the finals, and you lose in the semis.
Right.
It's like, you were right there, dude. Like, man, you're right there. You've gone through 6 guys. You went through maybe you went through the number 1 guy. Maybe you beat the former world champion. And now you hop in there, and a referee decides that the other guy looked better. And it's like, that's why it's so hard in jiu-jitsu to be like, and people do it. They're world champions one day after another, not just because they're the best. But man, I've watched like Michael Lange win on one advantage, and then he'll kill somebody else. It's like, it's really hard to coach for those guys, and it's hard to convince people to go to IBJJF and to spend money to travel, spend money to get their membership, spend money to enter a tournament, and then they lose, and you're like, man, that's it, no more. That's it for today. We don't even no losers bracket. Yeah, this isn't Naga where you can move up. Like if you're 50, you can fight in the 20, 30, 40, and 50 categories. Like Masters 11. You got like 80 matches, and you got nobody in 6 of them, so you got 6 gold medals and
Hell yes.
and 5 bronze, because there was 3 guys in the division. So it's like there's a problem with every sport.
Well, what you said there about tendencies when we were talking about Amanda Nunes, and how if she gets touched, she wants to come back at you immediately, and how that could be potentially exploited. We have similar things in jiu-jitsu. So you might call it like a false positive. Like I could be shitty at an armbar, and if I'm throwing it at a lot of people and surprising people with it, I might get a whole bunch of them in training, and they're terrible the whole time, but I might get just out of sheer surprise. And there's an economist by the name of Nassim Taleb, and he wrote this book called Anti-Fragile, and he calls it the turkey problem of economics. So if you start a business and it succeeds, it could be because you had a great business. It could also be you got lucky. Look at MySpace. MySpace was basically Facebook before Facebook, and yet Facebook is Facebook and MySpace ain't, right?
I still don't understand it. I thought MySpace was better, but
yeah. So you could in Facebook's case, we could call that a false positive, right? Like they won, but there's no logical reason why they did. It just happened that way.
Right.
But maybe there is. Maybe we just don't perceive it. But that's not even important. What he was saying is like the turkey problem comes from a lack of exposure to danger. So we have 2 turkeys. One hatches in an egg in the wild, right? Its mama, lays it and it hatches. From the second it pops out of that egg and out from under its mom's protection, it's got to deal with nature. There's a fox running around, doesn't have the warmth of its mom sitting on it, It's got to find food. It's got to find water. It's got to find sex to, create another turkey so that the species doesn't die. It's got all these pressures every single day. So its senses, its skills, its speed, its acumen, they're constantly being tested and refined. They have to be, otherwise it dies. We have another turkey, and its egg hatches in a turkey farm. And every day the farmer comes in, cleans up the turkey's poop from the night before. He's whistling like, a happy song, hands the turkey some food, pets the turkey, tells him how much he loves it. Turkey looks outside. There's a fence. No fox can get in. No raccoons can get in. It's safe, right? Mm-hmm. Its senses are lulled into this comfort. It's never being tested. By the time a turkey grows up, its breasts are too big for it to fly. It can't even fly, weighs so much, right? Like our wild turkey does not have the meat on it that a farm-raised turkey does, because a farm-raised turkey can't fucking fly. Right. So our turkey with the false positives is every single day it wakes up thinking, I am the luckiest turkey in the world, until Thanksgiving morning, when our farmer comes in and instead of his shovel to shovel out, our turkey's poop and tell how much he loves it, he's got a cleaver in his hand, right? Its senses are dulled. Its response time is dulled. Even if it wanted to, it couldn't run away because its breasts are so big that it's slow. So it's just this, basically, it's dead. There's no way around it. Whereas our wild turkey, even though it's lived a life of danger, is much, much less susceptible to that, that particular scenario. And those false positives like that, while, look, Nunes, honestly, I think she's legitimately the best in the world, doesn't mean there's nothing that can't be exploited. And the same goes for Khabib. So far, nobody has been able to exploit Khabib. But all those times that he was running at Ala Quinta with his arms out and his head up, he just looked like a cartoon character. Right. And he trusts his ability to chain wrestle so much. If somebody could exploit that, there is a turkey problem in that approach.
Right. Ronda Rousey.
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah.
Am I sure that someone can exploit Khabib's tendency? No, I'm not. I'm sure that it exists, and I'm sure that if someone could, it could be exploited. But that doesn't mean that anybody's good enough or has the game planning and the muscle memory and the drilling and the practice to do it. Only that there's no such thing as a perfect fighter. There's always a game plan that exploits some tendency that you have.
Oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's kind of like, and at the same time, those are hard because, so the turkey knows at any moment it can die because of past trauma, right? Because it deals with past trauma constantly. And it's funny, I was writing down a note. I can't remember off the top of my head but they're not future focused. And so many of us are living in the past and staying away from certain things because of the trauma that we went through when it went wrong. So we're so busy going like, well, I don't want to ever go back to that position in my life. And so we take less chances or we take less steps towards whether it's in our sport, whether it's in, it's like, so you have Conor McGregor and he lost and he took it on the chin, but then he came right back into his head that he was the best in the world. Because if he would have fought Diaz like a guy who is now beatable, he wouldn't have gotten the rematch decision. He wouldn't have fought Eddie Alvarez. He wouldn't have been able to take the Floyd Mayweather fight. I mean, here's a guy who is living without fear, it feels like. I don't know how many of us, I think every single human being has stayed away from something because failure is present. And that's the same thing with every sport, every job application, every pitch, whatever you're doing. you realize because somebody else said no, or because somebody else, was better than you, it's better to not waste your time with it. And so it's a weird balance between 100% self-confidence and not being stupid enough to not realize that you need to continually be working.
There's a training element to that too in jiu-jitsu. We all know some people that have an A game, and every day in training they just do that A game, and they're really good at getting to it and keeping people from taking them out of it. And let's just say, for the sake of fun, that A game is like pressure pass to mount to armbar, and they can just do it over and over and over and over and over again. Eventually, most of us, there might be a person who becomes so good at doing that they literally cannot be stopped. There's just no way. But for most of us, we reach a point of diminishing returns where we don't get much better after that. So let's say, you could go from 0 to 100 on that sequence, and you could spend a lifetime getting to 100, but that sequence will finish most people at, say, 50. And if you get to 60, you can finish almost everybody. But there's somebody out there who's got a defense that's 100, probably by accident, But maybe it's just the way it is. Different people have different attributes. There might be somebody that you can't do that to. So if you don't have some other set of options, then you don't. You won't be able to succeed in that one scenario. So you almost, instead of, let's say you're really good at that sequence, therefore you will never ever play guard. Right. Well, what if you come up against like someone like Marigali, whose guard just seems like, to me, like wizard, like it can't touch.
Yeah.
Well, now if you can't somehow, there's very low likelihood you're going to pass it. If you can't pull him into your guard and maybe take him out of his element, then you have zero. And so all that training time was spent, like reinforcing the one thing that you're good at, but not testing and training anything else. Right. And so when you run up into that wall, you spent that time being afraid to practice what you weren't good at. Now you have no response when the thing that you are good at doesn't work.
Yeah, as humans, we're ready for whatever excuse that we can give ourselves, or if we can't run from the excuse, we stop. I mean, to tell you the truth, every time I belt somebody up to purple, they stop competing. It becomes almost like a death row. It's like, you're on your way to purple. You've done a lot of blue. You've got some good wins, some bad calls. You've had up and down a couple of years. And then at purple belt, you're supposed to be good at jiu-jitsu. So then you start hiding a little bit more from the tougher roles. You start hiding a little bit more from people who maybe, let's say you're a brown, there's a purple belt that can take your back. Well, you just don't like the way that looks. You don't like the way it feels. You don't like the way it looks. It bruises your ego immensely, and you will refuse to go back towards that failure in order to improve yourself. And when you say somebody like Marigali, whose guard is so good, you're going to have to get a guard because he's going to sweep you. You're going to end up on your back. And if you don't focus on a lot more aspects of the game, somebody's going to take you there.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you on that. And that's a challenge because we love to win. I love to win. I'm not trying to pretend I don't. Right. And yet the most valuable training stimulus is usually not winning. Right. Carlson Gracie said, you win or you learn. So that should tell us that losing is an opportunity for learning. But it's hard. It's hard to convince yourself to say, okay, I'm a brown belt and I know this purple belt over here, let's say he's got a really, really good leg lock game. Well, maybe I just smash past his ass and he don't have a chance to ever take me into that zone. Well, did I get the chance to learn anything from having to deal with that? In the process, I'm going to have to eat a few taps, you know, but that's a very valuable training stimulus if I allow it to be. But in order to do so, I've got to be vulnerable enough to say, I might eat it from somebody who's not, their whole game isn't as good as mine, but this area of their game is.
Right. And I think if you go into that kind of context of not training other aspects of your jiu-jitsu, is that you're going to run into a problem at some point. And losing, when you lose, you learn, right? Or whatever the statement was. Say the statement again.
So Carlson Gracie said, you win or you learn.
Right. But so the problem with this, and I'm a Carlson Gracie lineage, but the problem with that is that sometimes you don't learn because you refuse to accept the truth. And you refuse to work on something that, or you just quit. You know, like there's plenty of guys that are like, I'm happy being good at my gym. I don't like the feeling of everybody going to come up there with me, and I lost in the first round. You know, it's happened to me 3 times. 3 times I went up there, 3 times I lost. I'm done losing. And they learn to listen to what? The past failures. Right. So it's like the past fear, the past failures, things that they're scared of doing. So they're not living in the moment of what the future could bring. They're living in the past of what the past could bring with it. You know, it's going to bring. And so it's a really hard job to manage your athletes, your students, your fighters into having this kind of unbreakable, like being like you could jump over buildings. And if so you tell me that somebody could pass my guard, I say, they have no way. Not going to happen. Of course I know it can happen, but I'm telling you it's not going to happen today. Today it's not going to happen. Today I can jump over buildings. Today I can bend cars in half. Today I am an absolute monster. You know, and it's a switch that has to be kind of put into a pressure cooker where you realize that you may not be the best in the world, but your best day is the best in the world. You can beat anybody, any given day, any given person who falls into your game and plays the game that you want to do. So you may be, you know, like I look at the meows a lot, and I say, man, they're getting really good on top. They're passing people's guards ridiculously good. Before they used to berimbolo, get on, and they would not even come up. They wouldn't come up for anything unless they were guaranteed to be on the back. You know, it's like they would berimbolo, the back was gone. They could take the sweep, but they would go back into the berimbolo and get nothing, until maybe they have an advantage or two for almost getting the hooks. Maybe they do get the hooks. But now you see these guys coming up off of failed berimbolos and passing the guard like they were born to do it. It's like that just added a whole new level of threat to guys that were already very, very scary to deal with. Like these guys, if you get, and I have no fear in saying, if Meow gets to the position that he wants to get with me, he will berimbolo me. You know, if I cannot stop the first 2 things that gives him the opportunity to berimbolo me, I'm probably already too far behind. Right? But knowing that in the past, all I had to do was not allow him to take my back. Well, that takes a whole part of the game away. I don't have to worry as much about berimbolo as much as I have to worry about the berimbolo with the back attack. And it goes, okay, well, if I can do that, I can stop him. But now you add a whole new threat level of Meow going, well, now I'm going to take the sweep and pass your guard. And now you're going to be down by 5. And it's like, and if I want to, I'll give you the position back. I'll berimbolo you again. I'll try to take your back from the berimbolo because I'm already up by 5. And it's one of those things where it's, that's the evolution of a guy that you want to see in that courses, because I know how to beat the meows. I don't know if I could ever do it, but I know I could beat them by stopping the back take. Now I have to realize that I may not be able to stop the berimbolo before it happens because they're that good at it. But they're also now not going to just try to take my back. They're okay with those 2 points. And at me trying to stop them from getting those 2 points because they're so good at passing allows the activity to go to the back.
Right.
So before I could have just thrown up all this different stuff at people, kept going, like not as long as I don't give my back in the berimbolo, right? Which makes that whole sequence very much easier. Makes it very simple what I need to do to stop it. They can put me on my back as many times as they want, but if they don't take my back,
yeah,
they're gone, and it's nothing. And then you go, okay, well, shit. All of a sudden they're coming up, and now I have to try to stop the 2 points, because 2 points in a good passer like they are now is a very dangerous person to be on bottom of. It goes, shit. Now I have to try to get out of the sweep, and boom, there's my back. You have to add these things throughout your career, or you're going to stale. And I think it's funny that, like a lot of people, they expect perfection, and they started losing matches more and more and more. And a lot of it was because of the unwillingness to come on top. And this is the same thing when you get guys in the MMA field, when you get guys in jiu-jitsu, you get guys that even in the training room, you know what they're doing. You know what I mean? And that doesn't mean it's not going to work against somebody else because they don't train with you every day. But I take either 10% off or 10% on. I think that's what I go with. Is my game is, let's say my game's at 75% efficiency. Well, in a tournament era, I believe I perform better in tournament type situations. So I give myself a plus 5%. But some guys are 5 to 10% less efficient when it comes down to, they don't get that tournament high. It's kind of like they're either have it or you don't. And it doesn't mean you can't win a world championship from it, but having the faith in your jiu-jitsu, having like this undeniable, like, this is, I am going to be the best guy in the world today, and you believe it, and it comes out that way often, more times than not, but when you lose, you're like, I made these mistakes. Doesn't mean this guy's like, I guarantee you, JT Torres is better than me. There's without a friggin' doubt. He's better than me. But I have a chance. And if I go in there and I think, it doesn't matter who he is. I know jiu-jitsu. It's my jiu-jitsu versus his jiu-jitsu. If I play it this way, he's going to make a mistake. When he makes that mistake, I'm going to capitalize. I think that's a huge mentality that people lose when they're looking at their past failures. They almost the fat turkeys, because they're so used to being coddled in the gym, or being high-fived in the gym, or being respected and looked up to, is that they can't imagine what it's going to feel like to show up, lose to somebody in the first round again at a tournament. And then they have to look at those same guys that idolize them, and they're like, is coach not that good? What happened with coach? Coach just got beat up. Is that because nobody understands that it doesn't, just because it doesn't mean you're not one of the best teachers in the world if JT Torres tears you a new one. Because I'm sure JT Torres is an amazing coach, but maybe JT, like this, it make believe JT Torres, I'm making up. Maybe he's terrible at coaching. Maybe he, you never know what's what. You only know what you see in a competition's mindset. So you would say, well, Michael Jordan would be the best coach in the world. No way. Just because the best athlete in the world is he may be a great mentor. He may be somebody that can give you a lot of life advice. He may be able to give you a little bit of information of like the book, The Secret, you know what I mean? Like where it's like, you believe in yourself and you do this, and you don't think about what if I miss this shot because you haven't taken the shot yet. You know, it's like you don't put yourself in those boxes. But I don't think Michael Jordan would ever be a good coach. You know, it's just not his role. And he may coach.
Even early on when he owned the Charlotte team, he was a terrible owner. He kept him on the roster, and you know, like he was. I forget the age, but you know, like he was significantly beyond his prime.
Right.
But he kept a roster spot that could have been filled with an athlete for himself, just in case he felt the team needed, you know, him to come out.
Right.
You know, and the other thing that you said there, talking about tournaments, and like you go and let's say you're going and you see your coach out there training and your coach loses. Well, guess what? 50% of the people lose in the first round. You know, like if first round happens, half the people that came to the tournament are going to have lost. Of all the people that enter a tournament, only one gets to win it, you know?
Right.
And this is kind of the issue that I have with some folks who think that you must, you know, train with a world champion in order to be a world champion. It's like, well, you know, there's very few of those. The total training environment, you know, can affect that too. And so if you come onto something, you know, like look at the Danaher guys. Like John Danaher, not only has he not won a world championship, he's never competed a single time.
Right.
And I'm not here to say that Danaher's the best coach in the world. He's clearly a good coach, you know, clearly a great one. But he's not a world champion, and nobody looks at him and goes, well, you know, he's not a world champion. They're like, you know, that's Danaher, you know, like he's one of the best coaches in the world. So I think, you know, you got to separate training and coaching and competing. Like those are all three separate things, and each one has its own, you know, part to play. Being a world champion, you can certainly pass on information that very few people can pass on because, you know, very few people have ever been it. But that doesn't mean that somebody couldn't be a world champion training with someone who cannot pass that information along because they don't have it.
Yeah, I think also that a lot of these guys kind of bite themselves in the ass because they want the income, they want the everything else. They'll attract good students so they can train with them and they let those guys teach. But you can't be focused on a team when you're the best guy on the team. You know, you can't, like, if John Danaher was training to compete against Eddie Bravo, you know, and trained to compete against Fabio Gergel or Mario Sperry or any of these guys that are the, you know, like kind of like the gatekeepers of old school jiu-jitsu, you know, like I'm sure he wouldn't fight Gracie like Hoyle or anybody, but, you know, I'm talking about just like long-standing vets, you know, like where, and it's like, man, how's Danaher going to be competing at the highest level at the same time giving Gordon Ryan, giving Nick Rodriguez, giving Nicky Ryan, giving all these guys his personal attention while he's still trying to win awards for his performance rather than their performance. And it's like, and somebody told me this one time, and I always remembered it because as I'm injured, I can either train with my students to kick their ass today and not teach for 2 weeks because I got to recover from what I did to myself, or I can teach every single night and make them better. But somebody was like, how Greg Popovich, best coaches ever. Do we expect to pass Greg Popovich the ball for him to dunk it? Right? I mean, we're like one of the only sports that sometimes where it's like, well, what's your resume? It's like, you're talking to Greg Popovich, one of the smartest men of all time in the game of basketball. They've won more games that they should have lost in any other team. and by 70 games, which is insane. And
Right.
that means the bookies had them as an underdog, and they won more times than any other person, any other team by 70. And you go, hey, Pop, here's the ball, dunk. When you dunk, I'll join your team. And it's like, it's that kind of mentality that goes like, well, if I want to be a world champion, I got to be around world champions. And it's like, no, guess what? That is true to an extent, because you have to have a crew of guys that all want to be world champions. So it takes that kind of ecosystem to survive and grow and build your way through that. But you're the guy who's running plays for you, Bill Belichick or whoever it is. You have to understand, like, hey, listen, he doesn't have to get out there and catch a spiral, like on the goal line for you to understand that he knows what he's doing. And I think a lot of this has to do with this being less of a sport than it should be, because we are way behind as far as sports go. Because our sport is so new that we haven't gotten to the point where there's so much money involved that Phil Jackson can say, you're on the bench to Pippen. Say you're on the bench to Rodman. Say, I don't like, because they have to, when teams buy them, right? So if a team has Allen Iverson and he doesn't show up to practice, right? Remember, it's practice. I miss a practice, and he got fined and all that other stuff, right? It's like, yeah, guess what, man? You missed practice. That's what part of this game is. In jiu-jitsu and MMA, guys are like, hey, man, I'm not going to be at class today. Hey, I can't spar today. Hey, I'm going to do my own thing over here right now. Like, I'm feeling a little bit out of it. My shoulder's bothering me. And it's because there's not a bunch of money in the sport yet. But, I mean, you have guys that are making their decisions for them rather than a coach, a GM, or an owner that has to make money, that are looking at this as money. So as soon as people start to look at sport as money, then we will get the right amount of athlete perfection as well as coaching perfection, because everybody's on the same boat to win a world championship. Everybody's on the same boat to get as many sponsorships to keep their job. Like, being an NBA coach lasts usually 2 to 3 years. Like, you're a 2-year coach. To be Greg Popovich is insane. To be a Spurs coach for over almost 20 years, and you go, okay, well, he's doing something right. Management likes him. He's continually turning out. Then you got guys that are like getting fired mid-season, and somebody completely else is coming in. It's because there's a general manager, because there's an owner that's trying to make money, and because all the players that they want to, it's either they want to tear apart or build the team or keep the team. So it's like, the Steph Curry at some point is not going to make it to the finals, because basically Kevin Durant decided to go to Brooklyn, and you got, Steph is pretty much the guy, and you hope because it's a good team, it's coached well, but until you can force your players to do stuff, you're really at the whim of how that guy wants to train. I get loud with my fighters. I yell at my fighters, do this. And sometimes they take it personally and they get upset, but it's not, they maybe it's because they haven't been a part of, like coming from an area where fighting makes money, and you say, I don't give a shit what you want. You're going to get out here. Why aren't you in class right now? Why aren't you on here? All right, man, listen, I'm not for you tomorrow. Like, there's a breakdown between team sports that are professionalized and singular athlete sports that are professionalized.
Sure.
And that I think is the biggest issue with our sport, is that we don't get overall say with our students. And I don't get to tell my student what he has to know, what he has to do, what do I expect from him. Because really, I'm just running a business, because there is no money in the sport of jiu-jitsu. And there's starting to become money in MMA, but not really. I mean, not enough that these fighters want to share. You know, they're not going to share a payday to have a great coaching staff, because they're big self-believers. They believe they could get coached by anybody, and whatever that 10% is, if you start getting 15 million, they're like, hey, I think I was paying you 2 million. I should be getting 3. And they're like, nah, dog, you're not fighting, I am. And it's like, well, man, I've been with you from this long to this long. And, you know, like, it's a very strange ecosystem to try to convince fighters to go and like, hey, you know what I think would be a good idea if you came to wrestling practice? They're like, oh yeah, you think so? It's like, yeah. I think your wrestling is really, really good. It's almost like you have to like lie to them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have to lie to them, to your fighters, in order to sneak them into a routine that you think they need. It's like, oh man, you're doing so great with your boxing, man. I really would like to see you more working out more with our boxing coach, and really working on your jab, because your jab is looking better. So whatever you're doing, just keep doing that. You know, it's like all you're doing is you're telling this, you're filling this kid up with gas, but it's for their benefit, you know, because if you say like, hey man, your boxing looks like shit, you haven't been doing the work. It's like, you know what, screw you. I'm going to go down the street to this gym, and I'm going to do what I want to do. And then the money doesn't come in, and, you know, and then you lost all the time that you spent on that fighter. You know, it's just such a weird way of no coach. I don't think any NBA basketball, football coach, NHL coach would ever want to do what we do. And because you don't get complete control of domain of what happens.
Well, you know, that reminds me of, I'm going to have to misquote somebody, but it was a very famous college basketball coach who tried it in the NBA and had a really hard time, then came back, won a couple of national championships, both on the front side of being an NBA coach and then on the back side. And he said the problem that he had with being an NBA coach was that with college athletes, he can tell them, hey, you're going to do conditioning, you know, and he would put him with the strength conditioning coach. He's like, I'm not going to be there. I got other things I got to do, but you're going to be doing drills with the strength conditioning coach. And you're going to do that Monday through Friday and twice on Saturday and Sunday. And, you know, you're not going home for Christmas break because March is right around the corner. So you get 2 days for Christmas, 1 day to travel, 1 day to do your Christmas, 1 day to come back. So it's 3 total days. That's what you get. You don't get a Christmas break. We got to do conditioning. March is around the corner.
Right.
And in the NBA, it's professional athletes. And
Right.
a lot of times the GM has hired the athlete to put butts in the seats. You know, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, they put butts in the seats. Nobody comes to watch a coach. Right. So that role is flipped. And it goes from I'm in control and I'll tell you, hey, look, if we're going to be prepared for March, you got to put in the work in December, and that's Christmas break. And I'm sorry, I wish you could go home, but you can't. Right. Whereas with a professional, he pretty much, is like, hey, I'm the one making, $30 million to put these butts in these seats. And if I don't feel like conditioning, I'm not going to condition, just like Allen Iverson. Practice, right. We talk about practice, not a game. Yeah. And so it changes the dynamic, and it's harder to build a team in the NBA than it is in college because of that dynamic. You can't make them all work together because they can operate as individuals.
It's a lot like that as well with trading, is that, a coach can't speak to another player, so let's say basketball, and until they get permission or their contract's almost over, whatever the stipulation is, a coach cannot reach out. But players are free to do that. And so in a lot of ways, that's a lot like the jiu-jitsu or MMA scene. Is like, where like this fighter's a friend with this fighter. It's like, hey man, what I'm getting over here is really good. And I think you would be a good fit. And of course, if I reached out to another fight, I don't reach out to fighters, but let's say another coach is reaching out to my fighter going like, hey man, you have all the potential in the world, you're getting held back. And his fighter's saying that for him. And it's like, man, it pushes and pulls people into decisions and bad decisions. That's just what life is a whole bunch of calculations and miscalculations
Sure.
of future dividends. But I mean, I just, it's one of those things where I'm at the point where I'm done. I'm not done. I'm done just being a small gym, and I really want to be a mega gym. Like not so much like where like I'm AKA, but I want to have a place for UFC fighters. A place where if they're between Charlotte and Bill and or let's even go like the triangle, we got Charlotte, Jacksonville, Charleston, and Mobile, Alabama. All those guys within that triangle should know that they only have to travel 5 hours to get to me, 5 or 6 hours to get to me, and I have rooms and dorms and all these places for them. And that's going to build the fighters that I currently have, along with helping them build their own selves up. And that's basically what Top Team is. It's basically what Jackson Wink is. It's a bunch of stars and guys that could be stars and guys that are just there to work. Like
Right.
that's their job is being good enough of a body to be in the gym every day, and I mean that's basically what like 75% of the guys there are just good bodies, because only 25% have a shot really. Everybody has a shot, but the coaches aren't pushing them. They're not getting the right work. They're not getting recognition. And so if you get something at that level, it's like the only way to grow is to offer more. It's like, because if I don't have a place to put guys, then where are they going to stay? They got to get a job. They got to go do this. Guess what? It's better. I can live with my mom or my girlfriend, split the bills, and train how I want. And if you're a gym where it goes like, hey, it's going to cost you $500 a month, or you can teach 3 classes, and and we'll get you a meal plan. All I want you doing is teaching 3 classes and focusing on fighting. Everybody's like, yeah, I'll do that. And that's when you start attracting attention. That's when you start attracting higher level guys, and those guys are going to break your heart too. They'll leave you in a second. But without it, you can't help the people that you really care about. So that's what I'm doing right now, is that I have a lot of guys that I do believe that have UFC potential, or world championship jiu-jitsu potential. And the only thing holding them back is the current state of the city that we live in. And it's not the coaching. It's not the coaching, because I can get guys, I can work with guys, and I can get them there. It's the rub of every other good fighter that they're going with. This guy's an NCAA wrestler, All-American. This guy over here has a 60, and let's not even make it great, 60 and 30. He has a 0.500 average of wins to losses, but he has 90 fights. It's like, so you're getting the rub off a guy who's been striking 90 times, and then now you're getting the rub off of a guy who wrestled in college all his life. And that's just where I'm at as far as with my brain. And it's weird how I'm trying to come up with the ways of doing, like, this is how it's got to start. It's got to happen quicker than what I want it to be, because I know the shelf life of a fighter is so small, and I take a big responsibility in managing that shelf life without pushing them too early or holding them back too long. It's a nightmare of ethical decisions. It's like I got
Huge. And this kind of brings me to kind of the last thing that I wanted to cover with you, because you're somebody, what you were just expressing to me there, you were basically saying you try to have a very thoughtful approach to athlete development. You're not just phoning it in. Like, you're sitting at 2 a.m, because we're getting pretty close to 2 a.m. right now, thinking about how can I make my environment better so that my athletes who have the potential to be champions can grow into that champion, right? You're not just saying, hey, I got a mat, I got some pads, I got some heavy bags, get out there and get after it, and you'll either make it or you won't.
Right.
You're trying to find ways to coach at the very highest level. That's something I really admire about you, is that you're not, and I don't want to use the wrong word, but you're not a half-ass about it. Like, you're whole-assing coaching.
Yeah.
And when we did our podcast together on your show, you asked me for recommendations about books from other sports or other fields of how people have created excellence in high-stress environments. And one of the books I recommended that I had read that really had an effect on me was The Perfect Pass, about Hal Mumme and Mike Leach creating the air raid offense in college football. And because it's such a cool book, I actually sent you a copy of it.
Yeah.
On the stipulation that we would get back together and talk about it, because it had an effect on me. And so for those who haven't read the book, the very most basic thing that I can give you is that in football, the adage has been most offense is 3 yards and a pile of dust, meaning that the run was considered the safest and the most effective way to go about football with the least amount of risk. And so most teams had big, powerful lines, and it was all about the scrum, and whoever won the scrum won the game. And Hal Mumme, who is kind of a wheeling dealing, like, I don't particularly think he's a very great guy. A little bit of a, kind of a car salesman, like mentality a little bit. But he's certainly creative. And he experimented at a high school and found that with less talented players, he could find ways to use the pass as of his offense, not the run. And took slower, less athletic players all through his high school and college career.
Weak arms.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just put up crazy numbers, just dominated defenses, just obliterated them, embarrassed them. And so I wanted to get your take on some of the things that as you read that book or listened to it, because I sent you the audio book, what stuck out to you and what parallels to jiu-jitsu or MMA or striking coaching, the different things that you do. How did that, kind of settle in your mind of things that you could take from it for your own work?
I think, one of the things that was interesting was that he had to get guys beside him that respected him. And like, he had that, I don't remember the guy's name, the defensive coach who he trusted, to handle all the defense. How much, like, because this is a long book. The book was very, very good. I can't say I know a lot about football, and so listening to some of the things, but the way he explained the book, the way that it went through the different. I mean, there was a lot of years in between.
Right.
I mean, this is one of those things where it's accumulation of something that you like, just like we were talking about before, a belief that this is going to be good, where that if I can make this happen, and also a little bit of stealing from other teams, which is, he, and it was admitted that BYU and different places where he sat down with coaches that were playing those, were running, or passing the ball like this. And I forget what guy just sat down and basically showed the entire sauce of, here's the magic.
Yeah, there was one section where one of the most prominent plays in the air raid offense is called the mesh.
Mhm.
And what the mesh is designed to do is to take the defense's best player. Most defenses, their middle linebacker is the best player on the field. He's usually the captain. Think of Dick Butkus. Think of Urlacher.
Mhm.
These are big, strong, fast, and also very smart players. Ray Lewis from the Ravens, and basically have your put two slot receivers to both run directly at the middle linebacker, and make the middle linebacker decide which one he's going to defend, or if he's going to stay in his zone and defend the zone. So he's got three choices to make. And so basically the mesh is designed to create that dilemma. But as they were running it, it wasn't working. And so Hal Leach and Hal Mummy and Mike Leach went to
Right.
BYU, and they basically kidnapped the one of the assistant coaches, and were like, "You're going to explain to us why this shit isn't working," and like, "How far are you making your slot receivers run out?" They're like, "We're making them run out 3 yards, and then turn." And he's like, "No, it's 6 yards, because you gotta
Yep.
give the play just a little bit more time to develop." And so, such a tiny detail, we went from the play wouldn't work at all to like it was unstoppable.
Yeah.
And they had to drive from like South Texas up to Utah.
Yeah.
And like I said, the same as what you're saying, they basically kidnapped this guy. They're like, "Okay, what are we doing wrong? And if you don't tell us, we're not letting you out of this building."
Yeah. And that was something surprising that like the whole book basically said, like, I was close, but this guy had the answer. It's like, and to think about how it intersects with martial arts is that we're seeing trends. We're seeing trends that are starting to work for certain people. I think one of the biggest trends one of the things that only John Jones's camp did for a long time was the oblique kicks. So you see Holly Holm doing them. You don't see anybody else doing them, but these are damaging. This is damaging fighters. And training it is probably very difficult. But now what I'm seeing is that they're taking more athletic fighters and they're doing calf kicks. So I see that as you can't really like, it's not a certain play, but it's like, how do I make my opponent slower? How do I take my opponent out of their position that he either has to make a decision to stay in the pocket with me, right? Or he has to move away knowing that he has no offense right now, as I have a free shot on the inside of the calf. And I think so, like, when I look at, like, okay, well, honey hole, that was pretty much, the saddle and everything else. The footlock game is kind of like the air raid, where it's like, if I force you into this position, it's going to be very difficult for you to leave it. It's very difficult for you to defend with 2 feet at the same time, and I'm locked in. And goes, and that, to me, that's what, like, we're looking at air raids, and we're going like, well, how can we compare this to fighting? And going, well, if we do a bunch of calf kicks, this guy has to make a decision whether he wants to be in the pocket or out of the pocket. If he's out of the pocket, then I move forward and take dominance of the ring. If he wants to move on me and I calf kick him, he now has to eat these calf kicks until he's less mobile. And now I took this athletic guy like Max Holloway, and I calf kicked the crap out of him until he's walking. And now that explosive pop, that lean on that leg, he's fighting southpaw. You're forcing them to play outside of their normal game. And that's what the air raid did, was it forced a decision to play how we're going to deal with these two guys, crossing each other and and one of them being open or not defended. And so that's kind of like what, at least in my thought process, I was like, well, you can't have plays continuously, but you can have game plans that pay off dividends in the end. And so it's like, I can't always calf kick, but when I have an opportunity to do nothing else, I will. And it's just a small implementation, whereas the air raid was like touchdown, touchdown, touchdown. I don't think, but that is a completely different sport. Whereas, you go, okay, well, if I fight Craig Jones tomorrow, the chances of me being put into a saddle position are very high. And I need to learn how to completely stay away from it without running the entire fight.
Right.
It becomes like where they've gotten so good at these entries that it's taken away jiu-jitsu. I can be better at jiu-jitsu than him. I don't have to be. He doesn't have to be better than me. He has to just force me into a place where I know less than he knows, and that's what's happening. I think with the no-gi jiu-jitsu, with all the heel hooks and the different stuff, is that you can be amazing at jiu-jitsu. You can be so good at jiu-jitsu that you're better than than your opponent. But if your opponent is better in that position, like the 50-50 guard or the saddle, honey hole, or whatever terminology you want to use for leg lock games, it's that. It's like, no, force him to stay playing this area. And at some point he will make a mistake, or I'm constantly attacking and I get the points. And I think that was those to me are the air raid moments of MMA. Like, you go, okay, Randy Couture, Chuck Liddell. Well, Randy Couture beat Chuck Liddell on the feet because he threatened the ground so much. And it's one of those things where once they caught on to that air raid type of defending two areas at the same time, I'm either going to defend the wrestling or I'm going to defend the punching. As soon as I defend the punching, I defend the wrestling now, because this guy's changing his attacks so much that he's not letting me set in and do my game.
Right.
And I think that's what we're going to see a lot more with, is the calf kicks, doing damage on fighters that are mobile or will be moving forward, and noticing that at some point we as, let's say Craig Jones is not better at jiu-jitsu than, and it's just me making stuff up, is not better than Leandro Lowe at jiu-jitsu. Although he has a win over Leandro Lowe with a rear naked choke, Leandro Lowe is better technically at all parts of jiu-jitsu besides the leg lock game. And there has to be, like, so the Barambolas were very popular and they're still very popular, but we've deconstructed them enough to know how to stay away from them against very good guys. So the best guys in the world have designed, and I think it's a matter of time, or it will kill jiu-jitsu. And that's a scary thought too, is that I don't want to watch, it's like watching ping pong. You know what I mean? Like, everything's going so fast. There's so many small micro positions and biomechanical positions that as a fan, I can enjoy, but I don't want to watch 30 minutes of one guy trying to catch another guy making a mistake. And because guys have become so good at both of them, is that at some point we're going to have to take apart the saddle and defend it, so that becomes an option that's not available as much. I don't know who's going to do it. I'm not going to say I am or I won't. I plan on working a hell of a lot on that position. And I'm sure great minds like Eddie Bravo, like Danaher, because if you look at it, Danaher their guys are fighting guys with leg lock games too. And it's like, there has to be a counter, because there's always a counter, but so far these guys are too good to stop from doing that. And that's what I see. I don't know, what do you think about the air raid and how it applies to martial arts?
So I have to preface it with, I never played football.
Uh-huh.
and also I'm a purple belt in jiu-jitsu and the world's worst striker. But I have thought about it a lot because something that really stuck with me was that how Mummy had a team. He always had teams because they were not these well-respected coaches, so they couldn't recruit 5-star recruits.
Mm-hmm.
So they were always playing with people that were slower and smaller and shorter. And your skill players, you want a 6'5" quarterback throwing to 6'3" receivers who can jump 40 inches. But they didn't have that. And so what you would think, the answer that should be there is that if you were going to win with that, then you need a super high-tech playbook, one that can just pick apart every defense's weakness. And instead, they didn't have a playbook. They had 7 total plays from, I think, 4 lineups.
They condensed it, right? They had too many, and then they condensed.
Yeah,
every down.
The rule was if we want to add a play, we have to take one out. We can have no more than 10 plays, none. And the reason for that was, in practice, they could only get so many reps. And so if they taught their players to rep and make decisions on a limited number of plays, suddenly their execution went way up on those plays, right? So they don't have 500 plays in their head. They've got, 5 plays. And the quarterback only has one job, and that is to not throw it at a defender. Well, how do you do that? You throw it at grass. If there's empty grass, there's no defender in it, right?
Right.
So if jiu-jitsu was, if we follow the Gracie family's mysticism or belief system, if it is designed for the smaller, weaker person, right, then the playbook, the more complex it is, you would think that would be the answer. But really, it's quality of execution of things that work and dilemmas. Because, like we were just talking about the mesh. The mesh forces the best player on the field to have a dilemma. He has to choose, am I going to defend my zone on the field, or am I going to defend the guy running to my left or the guy running to my right? So whichever choice he makes, if the quarterback knows to throw to grass, will always be the wrong one, because whichever way he goes, the quarterback just throws the other way. He doesn't even look at his player. He looks at the middle linebacker, and if he goes left, I throw right. If he goes right, I throw left. If he stays in the center, then I throw whichever way I want.
Right.
So if we think about that, then the number of reps that we do on the things that are good and that we know are effective. So like take the leg drag pass, right? Like it's proven at the highest levels it works. You don't necessarily need to have like this super high tech, 10,000 ways to pass the guard. Maybe you just need to be really good at a leg drag pass. And then if the person puts their feet, like they sit to a sit-up guard, so their feet are down. Well, now you have to have one really good pass against the seated guard that works, and that you got a lot of reps on. So I think it's like quality of execution and then making tactical choices based on what you can do well if you are slow. So like pressure passing, you don't have to be fast to do that, right? You don't have to be athletic. You can be slower. And if you have a good sense of balance, then you can pressure pass. So I think pressure passing, though it's not high tech, could be air raid if you drilled it enough and you were good at it, right?
Well, you got Murillo Santana, a guy like that is basically, I call any of those guys that do pressure passing, I call the working class BJJ guy. You got Bernardo Faria, you got Murillo Santana, they're fun to watch to a point, only because they force their opponent to do what they don't want to do. And nobody wants Bernardo Furia on him and going over under. It's probably hell, and so you have situations like that. And I think if you look at Leandro Lo puts his hand on the ground and he posts and he takes a lot of weight off his own legs to do these things, so that he's finding ways to kind of pummel his way to a pass.
Yep.
And
definitely air raid in that.
Yeah, and I think, and I like your answer better than my answer, because I'm thinking of unorthodox methods that are hard to solve on a defensive platform. So I'm going like, okay, we got this leg lock game it's hard, and dealing with a guy that's going to kick, that's going to like, the only thing I can explain what a calf kick feels like is like getting a flat tire. All of a sudden, your foot doesn't lift up. It just doesn't. It just doesn't lift up. It doesn't work. There's no spring to it. It completely diffuses movement, and you want him to even get hit there anymore. And so, and I've always, so I have a very, very broad jiu-jitsu game, but I have 3 to 4 moves in every jiu-jitsu game that I play. So and I will rifle through those on a regular, but so I try to make a game as complex as possible, but because but I know the concept. So if I break something down to a concept, I can make anything a move, right? So if I shuck him here, he posts his hand here, I put both hands on that hand's not going to touch my neck now. I'm in half guard. I frame my knee shield up. I create my frame. Do I go deep half? Maybe. Do I go underhook? Maybe. Do I look for Kimura? Maybe. So there's a number of items that become available because of me moving my opponent's hips in a particular way. And
exactly.
Yeah, and at some point, like, a lot of it's subconscious. Like, a lot of it's not as subconscious as going like, I go into a technique. It's like I feel where there's holes. So like, I would say a lot of times jiu-jitsu is more like knowing what a pearl feels like compared to a rock. And if I put my hand in the water and it's murky, I'm not pulling out rock after rock. I'm pulling out more pearls than I am rocks, because I understand the feeling of it. And so it's like, if I start piecing things together that feel right, that feel conceptually beneficial for me, then I move towards that area, and then I let the play open up itself. But in reality, yeah, I mean, it comes down to, like, they say, like, what submissions are you good at? I'm good at 4, really. Like how often do I hit? I hit the guillotine, I hit the loop choke, I hit the bow and arrow, and I hit the arm triangle, and one more is the clock choke. It's like these, but I have a lot more submissions that I attempt, but those lead back to my good ones. They always lead back to my good guard, my good sweeps, my good stuff. So I might have something that puts them over here, but I'm expecting them to do this, so it puts me right back into place of where I want to go.
So if you were game planning and you had watched a bunch of Malachy matches, you might see on the surface all these layers of complexity. Like maybe Malachy has this very complex game, but it's all flowing to, these central things that you got, tens of thousands of reps at.
Right.
And what you were saying about, that sensation and feeling for pearls, that was a beautiful thing. But I think you were also saying something as simple as Kazushi is air raid, because Kazushi forces dilemmas. Kazushi forces the middle linebacker to make a bad decision. Like if I move your hips the wrong way and you have to post your hand, well, now either A, that hand is mine, or because it's posted, I can do something with your other arm. because it's light. So, forcing dilemmas and bad choices is, through that sensation and through, reps and being good at it. I think that applies to air raid. So maybe all jiu-jitsu is air raid. You could make an argument that if the biggest part of the mesh play is forcing the best player to make a dilemma, to make a bad choice, then that's the science of jiu-jitsu is that it's making the person make bad choices.
Yeah, giving them a choice and then finding which choice is better for you or more efficient for you.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is, if I can get somebody's hips to start moving, I can start winning. If I can't get them to move, I'm in an issue.
And what's the best way? It's the hips. Like your hips are your linebacker. If your my hips are doing better than yours, I'm winning.
Right. 100%. Yeah. And I think it comes down to just really understanding that it's like I tell my guys every time, like, listen, guys, if you want to be really good at deep half guard, there's guys out there you should watch. I'm going to show you the 6 things I like from this position. I like this, and this. The reasons why is because it gets me underneath my opponent. It gets me into my X guard. It gets me into it filters my knee shield from a bad position. It makes my opponent weightless, and it allows me to flow freely underneath them and figure out if they really are that good. Once I get underneath you, I can really get an understanding of your jiu-jitsu. But I don't want to get to know your jiu-jitsu on an equal battlefield. I want to get to know your jiu-jitsu from not like, okay, you're in guard and I'm on top playing against you. I want to break as many of those patterns as possible and see what your decisions are. And then the more I see that there's a lack of efficiency over here, that's the way I go. I knock on that door. And then sometimes that really efficient area that you have, you leave unguarded because you're so concerned with the place that I'm attacking as the whole. And so it's and sports
just
are
like,
hard.
Just like an air raid quarterback, you're looking for the grass.
Right.
You're not trying to run into their defenses. You're throwing the ball where the defense is not.
Right.
That was an element that really stuck out to me, is how Mummy created a game, like a game plan where you could throw the ball 4 times as often as your opponent with a less talented player and have less interceptions because you're only throwing at the grass. You're never throwing, where a defender can defend. And so just like what you're saying, if I can move your hips, I can create grass. If I can get under you, that's the grass. I'm safe there.
Right. Yeah.
There's no can defense, so to speak. There's things I can do, but if I'm under your hips and I basically am in control of your base, I have a much more likelihood of winning that exchange than you do. You gotta be a lot better than me if I own your base to beat me.
Exactly. Well said. That's it, man. Yeah. And that's funny that we hit on that note because, like that book was one of the books that I listened to every night. And I can say, like, listen, man, I read, I go through a lot of stuff, but there's times where a book can't hold my attention.
Right.
But I ended up having to show my wife the air raid stuff, and she's like, well, why? Because I'm like trying to talk to her about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to explain to her what football was. As somebody who I don't watch football. So I'm like, God dang it, I got to explain football to her, and I don't understand football. And it's like I can watch any kind of play and understand why it worked. I can't explain, well, these guys want this and these guys want this. And it was a complete mess. We ended up talking about who was the quarterback, what was the running guy. It was one of those things, like I'm on like YouTube looking at like, what is air raid?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, I found one like Philadelphia Eagle. I'm like, you see this? This guy gets stuck out here. And like all things, there's an answer, and you just have to be ready for your And that's the whole thing with game planning, which sucks because you got one game plan. And then you go, okay, well, this is my game plan. This is what we're going to do. And then it ends up being something completely different. Like all of a sudden, Leandro Loeb's in worm guard for 5 hours. And it's like, geez, man. It's like, did he not watch Keenan a little bit? Like, was there no thought process when he brought him in the New York Open? But then it changed, and maybe Pans, I forget where it happened, where he didn't let Keenan get the grips right away. So it's like, well, that was, the worm guard is a really difficult guard to stop. You have got to put all attention at the worm guard, which also leaves a lot of other openings. Same thing with Berimbolo. Like, man, I know how to stop a Berimbolo, but do I know how to stop a Berimbolo with also the threat of a worm guard? And then you start getting into these battles that goes, man, you have to have an answer for the answer when the air raid gets stopped. Like when they start rushing all the time, or they're always or they've really picked apart your offense. And you go, well, where do we go? Because we can't put all our money in air raid because we got to play football at some point. But because I know it's probably one of the best concepts that there was out there that changed football, but I didn't know who Hal Mummy was.
Right.
I had no. So there's contributors to our sport that changed the game forever that weren't able to do it at the highest level of play. I mean, it wasn't like he was talking about he was playing with the Buffalo Bills, and or he was Tom Brady, he was coaching Tom Brady. No, he was coaching just regular kids, and everybody kind of followed up on that. But like anything else, there has to be an adaptation for when you do run it and when you don't run it, because guys pick up on it. Like all of a sudden there starts to be answers. There starts to be like, well, they're stopping you here, they're stopping you there. And that's as far as like, when the Darce Killer for myself came out, I was like, I just got put in Darces all day. I said Darce, and I just wanted to go over. There has to be somewhere a hole. Somewhere there's a hole. You have, there's no like metal circle that just keeps getting smaller until it crushes me. There's somewhere in that circle there's a hole.
No such thing as counter.
Right. And so that's basically what I did with the Darce, and Lord willing, time willing, like I'm running 80 different jobs, 80 different businesses, 80 different things going on. And it was like, well, when do I get time to, this is why I'm up at 2 a.m. It's like, that's why you're like, hey, what time are you good? I'm like, as soon as my wife goes to bed, it's either work or study time for me. It's like, because I know I'm not getting to bed before 2:30. That's just it. It's like, I make that because it becomes hard on myself to stay current with everything that's going on, so that I'm relevant when I need to be relevant.
Right.
And that's the hardest thing. And I think that they said the same thing about the coaches. They're watching hours and hours of footage. This is bullshit work. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
and also there's a humility element to what you're saying, where you're saying, I'm a good coach. I've worked hard to be a good coach. Oh, and by the way, I'm still working my ass off, right?
Yeah.
It's not saying like I've arrived or, I'm good enough. No, the desire is there to continuously improve. And looking at Tom Brady, for example, we don't know who Hal Mummy is. But I can tell you that the Patriots adopted a version of the air raid when they brought Randy Moss in, and have used it ever since. And part of what made Brady was Bill Belichick's willingness to switch from a 3 yards and a cloud of dust to an air raid mentality because of the quarterback that he had. And the talents that they had. It's no secret that they put a lot of effort into getting good tight ends with Gronk and Aaron Hernandez and slot receivers, Wes Welker and whatnot. Those inside receivers are a big element of the air raid offense, and that's straight out of Hal Mumme. And Bill Belichick at the time was a championship-winning coach, right? He had already won championship, and yet he's still looking for answers and trying and willing to completely flip the script on what he thought was the way football should be played because of the potential efficiency that his offense could have with the players that he had running it if he switched it. So it violated his philosophy, which was let's get big, let's get strong, let's get tough, to, I mean, look at Wes Welker, extremely famous player, almost undrafted because he was too fucking short, right? And yet he became, one of the best slot receivers of all time because he was well used and he worked hard and he understood the air raid from his lineage. So he worked with it and was ready to just plug and play right into that offense.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like you there's the GOATs, there's the greats, and who knows where I'll be. I don't know. I have no clue, but I know that if I chase it, I'll attract people that are as intelligent as me or as motivated as me. They'll see that what I'm doing is something that they want to be a part of, and it takes a little bit of workload off of you so that you can expand your research, expand your, like, that's just it, man. Like, I know that I'm limited because, well, I'm running a business, but when the business is running itself for a time being, then more on my coaching. I can focus more on my studying. I can focus. And so everything is everything I want is just ability to give me more of what I want in the future. I want to buy an RV. I want an RV because I hate driving to stuff, and I want an RV that drives its damn self. I swear, as soon as they make those automated RVs, I'm buying one. I don't give a crap how long I'm paying it off, because I like to sleep when I travel. I don't like getting on airplanes, having to like rifle through, pay a bunch of money. I just want to lay in a bed and arrive at my destination. But it's like, so it's one of those things where if I get to this next point, it just allows me time to do things that I can only do part-time right now, because that's not what pays the bills.
Right.
What pays the bills is this, and this. And this is the thing. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was only going to say that, just like you said, if you're making the attempt, you will attract people who are also going to want to be a part of that. One of the things that this podcast has taught me in the interviews is that cultures of excellence both produce excellence and attract excellence. So, and we interviewed Dr. John Lee, he's a professor of executive leadership. And he talked about lifetime learners and cultures of life. And that starts from the top. And so running ATT Low Country, by demonstrating and leading from the front that you're, a continuous student, that's going to inspire your students to be that as well. Whereas if you came from hey, I know enough, I know everything you need to know, well, then they're just going to take what is spoon-fed and not be continuous learners on their own, because, they're being incentivized to do that. So you're putting together, like the foundational elements of a culture of excellence through self-work and self-study, and humility, but also the self-belief that if I put in the work, I will get the results, And so, to give an example, the work that you've done in technique innovations through things like the Heisengard and the Darce Killer and that comes from the lab. I don't know how many times you had to tap to lower belts while you were putting the Darce killer together, like just trying to find every possible permutation of the Darce and how to lose in it. But I know a lot. That work is something that, you know, when I saw, like, for example, the Heisengard, I said, here's a guy who's really digging deep on things. And that's fascinating to me. You know what I mean? And I like that. So I'm not trying to say that in any way I'm excellent, but I am trying to say that your theory is right. It's already attracting, you know, people that are interested in the same thing, which is like, what is the science of grappling? What is the science of, you know, fighting? What is the science of even running a business in this, you know, sector? You know, like all these things flow from the same, or spring from the same well. And so I think just like what you said, I think you're exactly right. If you're making the attempt and being sincere, not phoning it in, not saying making the attempt, but making it, then you'll come to, you know, a solution. And it'll be your best version of that solution, which is going to be a worthwhile one. You know what I mean? But it'll take time, and it'll go in increments, but it will find you.
I always do the 5-year thing for myself. I always go, well, I'll retire in 5 years. And it just keeps going. I mean, that's what it is it's because I worked my ass off in that 5 years to get to where I want to be. Then I realized, hey, the next goal looks pretty damn good too. You know, it's like, I mean, if people understood where I was, you know, like people would say like, oh, well, you know, you're so lucky. It's like, man, when I created the Darce killer, I've already had 2 neck surgeries. You know, it's like that, or when now that I own a gym, and, you know, I believe my gym is the best gym in Charleston, in the surrounding areas. It's that I also lived in an apartment with 5 guys to get to this point. I also moved all around the country without my family. I moved to Florida, and I lived in a mother-in-law shack. And we bought a foreclosure for $25,000. You know, it's like all these things that my wife, you know, had saved, and then coming down here and to my everything was a chance. But it was like you could not tell, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between 2011 me and 2020 me, because I'm in so much, and it's not like financial security, but it's I'm a grown up now. And but I took the opportunity to be better, and I took the opportunity, I took the risk. I was like, and I'm very nervous when it comes down to taking risks, because it's just one of those things where I need my wife to push me and go like, this is fine, we're gonna do this, and she helps me out a lot. But it's like, man, like now that I'm looking at my gym not as I want the most amount of members and I want to make the most amount of money, I'm looking at how within these next 2 years before my new gym is built, how do I make this the biggest culture in Charleston and already have things rolling, so when we get into the new gym, things are moving so fast that I can now say, okay, now I'm doing this, you know. And that's just it, man. Like the doctor told me 3.5 months into opening the gym, you can't bend over. He says, if you keep doing this, you're going to need surgery. I got the surgery 3.5 years later because I effed my body up real good. But I knew that you don't get many chances like this. You don't get the chance to open up a gym and be like, oh man, my back is killing me. I'll talk to you guys. You know, it's like, oh man, for me, a lot of people, they want, like when you talk to certain people, and there's not jealousy, but there's just kind of like, well, why him? You know, like, well, you know, like why does he get to do this? Why does he get to have this? And it's like, man, you can have that too. You can have whatever you want, as long as you're willing to sacrifice your happiness to a degree. Like people think like because I teach martial arts and I teach what I love that I'm happy. That's not necessarily true. You know, like people don't realize how much I hate talking about jiu-jitsu to a point. You know, like I don't like talking about MMA. I don't like talking, which is funny because I'm on a podcast talking about it. But like when I said I like TV, well, hey man, you like TV? Yeah, man. I put on Judge Judy and watch Judge Judy as I work on my stuff for martial arts or my business or whatever I'm doing. But I enjoy Judge Judy. I don't enjoy talking to one of my blue belts about jiu-jitsu as much as because I'm like, man, I've had this conversation. Let's talk about something else. Let's talk
Right.
about this or that. Unless I'm being challenged, unless I'm able to move my thoughts around and aerate and kind of, you know, and it just gets to a point where people don't realize like, man, you're going to do this you're going to work on this so much that you're going to hate what you do. You know what I mean? Like
You get so far down, the rabbit hole. When you've seen a double leg 10,000 times, it's not that it's boring anymore. It's that, it's difficult to turn your lights on about it.
right.
And I think that's a normal thing that makes you human, right? Like you can love jiu-jitsu and have seen too many triangle chokes, and explain the triangle choke too many times to a point where it then becomes, not boring, but even annoying to think about. And that makes that's normal. So like I'm an airline pilot. 10,000 hours of flying an airplane, I don't get that excited about flying airplanes that much anymore. Now I have new challenges. My challenge now is how can I be the best mentor and, in a way, teacher to my first officer? How can I make them the best captains that they can be? How can I help them to express their physical flying skills to the level that it's got to be, so that when they're a captain, they can let go and let their first officer get out there and kind of make mistakes at first. Like you can't let them. You can't expect someone to get better without letting them off the leash. Well, letting them off the leash is kind of scary, and so you got to be good enough that you can let them get out of hand and know that you can bring it back in. And so, continuously looking for new challenges is a portion of being a lifelong learner. And so having that explorer's mentality, which you have, it's a two-edged sword. In the one hand, it makes it pretty tough to teach your 10,000th armbar. Right. But on the other hand, it makes your drive to excel and to continuously go further and further down the path, one that you're driven to do, which is, that's a great dilemma to have, right? It's a great problem.
Yeah.
Which is, I love this thing so much that I want to go so far down it that I know everything about it. But that also makes it hard to talk about the very beginnings and the basic stuff to somebody who's never done it before and listen to a blue belt talking about how awesome, collar chokes are.
Man, you should really be going for this move, man. I saw this move on YouTube.
Exactly.
But you know what? I think that's what me and you have done with other sports or doing is that we're trying to find jiu-jitsu without having to talk about jiu-jitsu. We're trying to look at other sports. We're trying to look at Dennis Rodman. We're trying to look at Michael Jordan. We're trying to look at Larry Bird. We're trying to look at Marshawn Lynch. We're trying to look at the mentalities of brilliant coaching that doesn't necessarily apply to jiu-jitsu, but 100% applies to jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. And it's like, how do I find like I like John Danaher. I cannot listen to him. I could read if he wrote a book, I would read the book. Not a problem.
It's hard to listen to because he's so monotone.
Yeah.
I find that I receive information a lot better from Ryan Hall.
Yeah, me too.
Than Danaher. Now, does that mean that I don't think Danaher is amazing and that the information he's passing on is not completely valid? No, absolutely not.
Right.
It means that the delivery system is tougher for me because I get like lulled into like a trance almost from the monotone.
Right.
Whereas Ryan Hall's like, you know, he kind of talks shit the whole time, and
Right.
I love
Yeah.
talking shit. Like, so.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I've been going back over some Ryan Hall stuff, because the last time I looked at Ryan Hall was probably 6 years ago. And I'm like, my understanding of jiu-jitsu has changed so much. So it goes like, what did I think wasn't valuable enough to me that actually is? So I go back and I'm watching a lot of his stuff, but it goes like, man, in order to keep myself sane from not wanting to just jump off a bridge, I gotta find motivation in other places, and I gotta find where they've been involved in the sport. And there's millions and millions and millions of dollars, because those people that are in place, just stupid decisions. These are made by millionaire, billionaire owners, and a GM who wants to keep his job, on top of a coach that wants to keep his job. And it goes like, okay, well, man, now we're talking high stakes. You know, like if Amanda Nunes would have gotten knocked out last night, she probably wouldn't change camps. She would probably just be like, that happened. This happens to everybody, blah, 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 blah. You know, I wasn't prepared, but the next time it'll be different. But the coaches would be terrified that she would leave. You know, that they're going to lose this value. And whereas an NBA coach has more opportunity, but he has higher stakes.
Right.
We're talking millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars, and you're talking about fighting for endorsements. So it's like, man, I want to know what master experts do at that level, and how I can think like them, how I can deliver the same message. You're gonna like this, man. I think Tuesday I'm shooting a podcast with my friend Joachim. Was Alistair Overeem's coach, and a guy who's a hypnotist. We're going to be going over we're going to be going over conversations of how to speak to your fighter, how to speak to your athlete within that 45 seconds. So pause. So it's like, so there's some certain things like we talked about selling business stuff, and it was like, this, you can choose this or this. We say most people choose this package, and it goes, well, most people that are just starting out choose this package, and I'm not overselling them, I'm not underselling them. I'm not going like, well, this is the cheapest thing we got. I'm saying this is the thing right here in the middle that'll let you, you're going to get enough training in, and you can always move up. And
right.
So that kind of, but the wording of most people choose, right? And then the wording, then he says something like, we were talking about, it was like, hey, I don't get taken down. Starts a negative image block. We want to keep the tone. We want to keep the fight standing. Keep the fight standing is a better thing than saying don't get taken down, which kind of gives them the mentality that they can be taken down, right? And so it's going to be interesting, because Joachim is very, very high level coach who's going to have a lot of questions, and this guy was a killer on. We clicked, at least when we started finding out like some things that like, oh shit, these are words. These are words, because he said like, put your fingers together. Imagine that they're two magnets. I have a broken finger, or not broken finger. I have a finger that doesn't have any pull in it anymore. So it's like this kind of finger. This is my one finger. This is the other finger, just so you can see how bad it is. Anyway, I told him like, he's like, now try to pull them apart. Now the word was try. You made yourself believe that these two things are stuck, the world's strongest magnets. And then you close your eyes, and it's like they're so stuck together that you cannot undo it. And it says, now I want you to try to open your fingers. And it becomes hard because the word try, it assumes that they are not going to come apart. And so it's almost like, well, if I have 45 seconds in there with my fighter, I say, I don't need you to get taken down. Don't get taken down. When the words that flashes in the imagery of them on the ground losing to this opponent, when you want to flash the imagery to, hey, let's keep it standing. We're doing great standing. And so there's different kinds of word plays. And so I'm going to be working Tuesday. We'll be shooting that. And I think that that's a huge thing in sports, is that we only get if I get 45 seconds to deliver the best message I can possibly deliver, but also get the reaction that I need from my fighter, that's crucial. You know, it's like I've probably been doing it wrong my whole life. It's like, hey, stop fucking around. You know, put your hands up. Let's go. I want straight punches. Let's go, man. You know, it's like, maybe that is right, because I'm telling them this is exactly what I want. I want nothing different. But if my guys can beat the tar out of them, yeah, then it starts to become, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, rather than when we're winning a fight, do this,
Right.
do this, do this, do this, do this, and we're going to win this fight. When then we're losing, we're like, hey, I know, man, you're getting taken down too much. You're dropping your hands. We're talking about things that they're visualizing in their head of them dropping their hands. They're visualizing themselves as those. You got to, we'll see. You know, it's like, it's one of those things where it's,
I remember, and I apologize for this because I'm going to say this and then I can't attribute it to anybody. But I watched a fight, and they had the coaches mic'd up, and I thought the coach just said the most magnificent things. Between every round, he said the same things every single time. Straight punches, underhooks, head position. Straight punches, underhooks, head position. It was just like, it was a broken record. And his fighter goes out, straight punches, the clinch would happen. He'd punch for the underhook and get his head, where it belonged. And it was like, that was a winning effort. And he only said three things to the guy, just kept saying it. He wasn't saying like, oh, you're fucking up or any of that. It was just like straight punches. And he might have actually said like, slow your breathing down a little bit or something like, it was like just one extra thing. But there's beauty in that simplicity if you got that shared language.
Yeah, and I think that's the next step for myself is improving how I deliver. Like I'll always deliver how I teach in different ways, but when it comes down to that crunch time where I got 45 seconds, I'm a pit crew. Like if the pit crew's not working together, the car's going to go out too fast. It's not going to have everything it needs to have. We want to get gassed up. Maybe we screwed up on tire time. And it's just all these different things. It's like, we got to be a well-oiled machine. And that starts with the language. The language that we use cannot get confused. Like if I have 45 seconds to make me feel like the fight is still his.
I think I might have lost you. I'm not sure. Well, for anybody listening on audio, Malachy's frozen right now. See if he comes back. Pause the recording here.